Mm.
It's going to be a completely different vibe than where we are right now. Right now, we're in the center of the city. This is more of the upscale neighborhood. As you can tell, they have IKEA. That's a shopping mall right there. People here in Dominican Republic will not do what we're doing right now.
They will not go to quarantine.
No, hell no. Because they say that it's dangerous, but here instead of guns, they have machetes.
Might cut my neck clean off, right?
We're definitely gonna get looks. I'm not bringing my wallet. I'll take whatever cash I need. And
So homeboy with the camera's got a fat fanny pack. Do we want to bring that?
Do we want to test it out? Leslie, you want to test it out in the 42?
Yeah, look at that. That shift in the road quality. We went from paved road to straight dirt.
Good to meet you. Tyler, that's right. After picking up our local guide and guardian angel Juan, it was time to enter what is supposedly the most dangerous hood in the Dominican Republic.
Hey, what's up, what's up? I'm Juan, I'm from Urbano Tours. Okay. Places tourists do not usually come to, I take them there.
A lot of people love to come and visit.
And I get to see a lot of people probably drinking, a lot of people playing, a lot of people doing all kind of stuff. No saque los teléfonos por la ventana, que aquí se los roban. Los teléfonos en mano por la ventana aquí. Man, se los roban. I would say that you could come whatever you want in the DR. You just got to be cautious of where, what you have on you. I wouldn't recommend you to go everywhere without having a local with you. Okay. You could do it if you want to, but you would have to probably not have valuable things on you. That's all. The guy we meeting today is one of the bosses in the place. He controls the area.
So he's like the mayor, the king.
There you go.
He's sipping while motorcycling.
Of course. That's very common, as a matter of fact.
So is that why the driving is a little bit questionable out here?
Probably. There's a high percentage of that. This is the entrance to the 42th Street. From here on, this 42.
Que lo que? Whoa! Snatched at me. What the fuck? She went straight for this. Bienvenidos a la 42. Do you know these people? These are homies or what?
One of them that I know introduced me to the rest of them. This is Tony Prendido right now. This is the boss around this area.
Esa es la vuelta, ustedes saben mi gente, lo que quieran más aquí abajo. La más tienen que tirarme ahí, Tony prendió la vuelta. No hay que quedar la soltura aquí abajo, normalmente. Y bien cuidado, ustedes saben.
Soy un gringo. Okay, we're gonna go for a walk right now. We got the whole squad. We got a good squad. I'm feeling great. We're gonna hop on one of the motorcycles. How are you guys feeling?
Bien, estamos bien, gracias a Dios, usted sabe. Y a la gente que viene en pan de nosotros también, que vienen a confianza aquí, porque saben que nosotros lo cuidamos, ¿tú me entiendes? Amén. Que siga viniendo aquí, le damos ese mismo cariño y mucho amor también.
Motorcycle. Am I hopping on? All right, we're going for it. All right, oh, que lo que. Good vibes out here. Hope I don't get snatched. Dang, take one. Que lo que, papi. We're going to the alley? Yes.
Man, I love driving motorcycle in an area like this.
Frena para el 27 diciendo que tú eres malo, que tu cuerpo lo vamos a coger de objeto de disparo por sonido, dan el culo y dicen que son los sicarios.
I couldn't drive on the road or like highway or something.
Menores están en los platos, que están vaqueando los puntos con su tabla siempre cuarta, nadie quiere ese difunto. Rompiendo todos los proyectos, a mí nadie puede llegarme. Nada más que yo me muera, puta loco.
Muy bien, muy talentoso.
We're going inside the studio.
Okay, we're going to the stew. We just got an improv performance outside. All right, we're coming in the casa. Muchas gracias. Showing the record. Get a shot of this. All right, let's check it out. What do we have here? Okay, setting this
Nosotros
up.
damos la oportunidad a los nuevos talentos y a todo el que quiera grabar, nosotros le damos el apoyo. Han venido gente internacional que saben cómo nosotros lo tratamos y cómo nosotros nos comportamos aquí en la 42 de Capotillo.
Estamos apoyando a la comunidad, gracias a Dios, por eso mismo, porque aquí vienen muchos artistas jóvenes y vienen todos los artistas también internacionales también.
Aquí vino Eladio Carrión, ha venido Anuel, ha venido Mickey Wo, aquí ha venido Echo, bajó aquí donde nosotros, un sinnúmero de artistas internacionales.
What's something people misunderstand about 42?
Entonces, si la persona nunca ha llegado aquí a este espacio, nunca entiende. Cuando ellos vienen que ve el apoyo y la vaina, se siente protegido con uno mismo.
Okay, look at the studio though, very nice.
Te vamos a dar un tour por la 42.
Look how people came out and support. And you got the bottles over there, you got the presidente over there, la fuerza.
Te vamos a llevar.
All right, so Them Boys music originally from the DR. It's a mix of hip hop, rap, and things like that. But we made our own thing from everything. Sure. This is where they be making this type of music, and a lot of artists, like famous artists, coming here.
Si no bajan para la 42 van a morir ciegos. Tienen que venir aquí para que la sientan. Si usted no bajó aquí, usted no la va a sentir. Y que en otro lado eso es cotorre. Aquí en la 42.
Por una persona que no es mí, es peligrosa, que ven aquí.
Aquí usted baja confianza, a usted nunca le va a pasar nada. Usted puede venir aquí con los ojos cerrados.
Por Tony Prendido o John
Okay, con Tony Prendijo. If an average gringo came in here without you, without Tony Prendijo, how their experience would be?
No, No, tú sabes que uno de una vez se hace responsable hacia ellos. Uno lo ve.
¿Ah? Hola. ¿Qué es lo que? Okay, muy bien, muy bien. Let's see. Hola. Hola.
Despite the fact that showing up here with a camera as an ethnically ambiguous Caucasianoid from America with a fanny pack full of cash is not a good idea on paper, the hospitality and vibes out here was nothing like you'd see strolling through the trenches of St. Louis.
Hey, gringo. Gringo. ¿Qué es lo que, señor? Soy gringo. Hola. What do people do for work here mostly?
A lot of people from these areas live the day by day. People that sell things on the streets. I don't know if you've noticed these pickups that are selling plantains, tomatoes, whatever they find, they will sell them. So we're heading towards Ozama River. That's one of the most important rivers in the Santo Domingo area. Yeah, Dominicans are very approachable. Dominicans are usually saying hi, saludo.
Hola. Hola. ¿Qué es lo que? ¿Cómo estás?
Estoy bien.
Ok, muy bien, muy bien. ¿Cuál es tu vida aquí?
Oh, la vida mía aquí,
Bien.
en mi país, mi barrio,
country.
está mi gente,
My people right here.
mis tigres.
My gang.
Quiero comida.
Comida, está muerta.
No lo puedes mostrar, no puedes mostrar.
¿Sí? Ok, vamos. Smells muy bien. Smells muy bien. Hi.
huevo, pared, todo.
It's gonna be your son.
Hola, mi son. Hola, niño.
Godfather, she said.
¿A dónde es el papá?
Went through the border of Mexico.
Ah, qué pena. So if anyone watching wants to be a father, can they come down and step up?
Sí.
People are very nice out here. We're walking through, we're getting the invites into the house. You wouldn't see that in the States, by the way.
This community is proving my point, what I told you earlier. Aesthetically, it may not be the nicest stuff, but it's for a community. You see people sitting outside. In the States, I lived in an upscale neighborhood, and you don't see people sitting outside.
No, you don't.
And this is supposed to be like dangerous and stuff, but you see people coming out here talking, cooking,
all good
kids
vibes.
running outside. The colmados here are a place for people to come. It's where you watch sports, it's where you drink beer. It's like a gathering point, and they have them all throughout. Whether it's an upscale community, it doesn't matter. Here, colmados are a place for the community to meet up. Here you can find everything. It's like a mini grocery store. As you can tell, look, the kids are out here playing.
Oh yeah, they're gaming.
With cell phones and tablets, and if it's so dangerous, how are these kids out here?
Okay, true.
Right?
No, ni prendido la puerta, gracias señora.
Bienvenidos a 42. Sí, sí. ¿Cómo es tu vida aquí?
Bien nítido, bien, gracias a Dios. Trabajando, jugando pelota. Sí.
Las personas muy simpáticos aquí.
Aquí entre dos.
¿Por qué?
Él trabaja y también está en el deporte, va a la pelota. Él es un muchacho bueno de aquí del barrio, serio, y le damos su apoyo y lo cuidamos también.
Refresquito a los muchachitos chiquitos que estamos ahí en el barrio.
Let's buy some sodas for the kids. But real quick, you might be wondering how I stay connected online when I go to foreign countries across the world, like right now in the Dominican Republic. I remember when I was 19, I took my first trip abroad by myself to Italy, and I had no cell service, no data, and I had to hunt down a physical SIM card across Rome without navigation because I had no data. It was hell, and I wish I was better prepared. Now I just use eSIMs like the sponsor of this video, Saily. It's as easy as downloading the Saily app on your phone, choosing a service plan in whatever country you're in, applying discount code Tyler at checkout for 15% off, and installing your eSIM in seconds. Give it a few seconds, and boom, you can stay connected like you never left in the first place. With Saily, you only have to install a new eSIM once, eliminating the need for you to install a new eSIM for every country you visit. And you can significantly reduce the annoying and expensive roaming fees your cell service provider typically charges you every day you're abroad. No more waiting in line at the airport to get a SIM card, and no more wandering around looking for public Wi-Fi to tell your family you're still alive. Stay safe, stay connected, and explore the world with one less thing to worry about using Saily's eSIMs available on iOS and Android with 24/7 customer support. And scan the QR code on screen, download Saily, and use code Tyler at checkout for 15% off. Thanks, Saily. Back to the DR. Vamos conmigo, vamos conmigo. ¿Quieres refresco? Necesito tranquilo, tranquilo, tranquilo. Okay. Hola, cámara. Hola. Okay, sí. We got beer in hand. We got good vibes. We got Tony Prendijo. So Juan, I've noticed I haven't seen a single homeless person as you might see him in the United States.
Dominicans are people that are like family oriented, and whenever something happens to a family member, it is more probable of a person taking them into their house than having them on the streets. They are homeless people,
but it's
I don't
not
think
up
it's
to
as much as in the United States.
the family mostly.
They are like everywhere.
You guys have fentanyl?
Nah.
It's
There
up
are
to the-
probably some of that here, but nah.
No.
It's up to the homeless. They want to. I don't know, like whatever, but
He's dancing. Are you basura collection?
I don't think that's the case mostly.
Unfortunately, the people that live around here do not
They
have
don't
access
want to be with their
main
family.
road. We unfortunately have this littering issue because the trash
They
trucks
want drugs.
Yeah, there's nowhere to put it.
Exactly.
Tony Prendido is taking us to the pools here. Taking
Those
baths in
drugs
here in
is
this water.
good.
This is Natural Springs. Hola. ¿De dónde eres, niños? ¿De dónde eres?
En el RD, la Sulsa, nos bañamos aquí en pileta de cabeza y de todo.
¿Cómo es tu vida en 42?
Todo frío, Melma aquí, con los muchachos.
¿Tus amigos aquí?
Sí, ellos son los... No jugamos pelota.
Okay. We got the whole city out here right now. We're in 42.
Tony prendido para diputado, para regidor, para el 2028, para cuando sea, pero hay que tenerlo ahí.
Should I jump in? Ah, you're right. How am I gonna try? Be careful. Hey. Oh, okay. That was good. Look at them. They're fighting in the water. Los niños. Bienvenidos a 42. Sí. Okay.
I find it a little bit weird that he's just letting himself get in ragdolled.
All right, we got a strike one right here.
Because he knows they would gut him and rob him.
Todo el mundo te odia. Mangue 2 pesos, tú quieres ser mi novia. Me quieren ven olla, pero no se le va a dar. Aguanta el chamaquito que viene de muy para atrás. Va a doblar, va a doblar, va a doblar.
Tu cuerpo lo vamos a coger, los gestos de disparo, por sonido dan el culo y dicen que son los sicarios. Tú sabes que tu rabia que lleva el veterinario.
Wow, the love out here is real. Ah, oye, sí, esto.
¿Cuánto es eso, mi amor? 3 for $100.
Tenemos. We're saying money. All right, we're eating. We definitely overpaid by like 1,000, but we bought plantains for the whole village.
There you go. That's what it's about. For those that don't know, right now the conversion rate for $1, it's 60 Dominican pesos. You pay how much?
200.
200 pesos. That feeds all those kids.
So all the kids get to eat though. They're happy. Perfect. All right, that's a win though.
That's nice.
¿Por qué?
Mamá, Ángel, tengo que sacarlo de aquí ya. We gotta get out of here.
Let's go. No posible. No posible.
Give me money.
Everyone's asked for money. We up, handed out 2, 3.
He asking for money again, but you don't have to.
Okay, what's about to go down?
It's about to go down right now. So that's what they got.
For us or them?
Something going on.
Yeah, right now.
Like some gang?
Something, yeah. We gotta leave for sure now.
To us, to them, like...
Tú me entiendes, como las cosas ya sabían que venía una persona.
We were told to leave. So we were told to dip because something dangerous went down. They kept it vague.
Something was about to happen because they know you here. They didn't make it clear what was going to happen, but
Yeah, they just want his money.
are just saying that something could happen.
For us.
Yes.
Enemies.
Someone's plotting like a robbery of us. Got it. So we're getting an escort out of here. One of our boys is helping us peel out.
UrbanoToursRD.com.
I'm not moving a single step in those countries, dude. I watch all these videos about
coastal town
all the
known
stuff
for
in the
beautiful
world.
beaches and sex tourism.
I'm not going anywhere, man.
This town and many other poor coastal towns like it
Fuck
here
that
have
shit,
made
dude.
the
What the
DR
fuck?
an attractive destination for people all over the world looking to buy sex. I pulled up to see if the reputation met reality and why the ladies were out here working the streets.
Estoy aquí porque me gusta cuerear.
Real quick, YouTube does not like it when I talk to prostitutes, so if you want to watch the full interviews with these girls, go subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/TylerOliveira for $5 a month to get early access to every video, extended and uncensored cuts, and DLC content like our time in Sosua. Back to the video.
If you would have come to Dominican Republic 15, 20 years ago and see what Dominican Republic is today, you wouldn't believe like what you see in front of your eyes today. When they come back to DR, whether it's from Europe or the US, they're in complete shock. And I know because of the comments that I get, people are like, wait, that's Dominican Republic? That's not the Dominican Republic that I remember. Because Dominican Republic used to be like this, no power, no water. It was extremely rural. A lot of Dominicans are coming back. They see that there are opportunities here that weren't available about 20 years ago when they left.
What do you think the biggest reason for that is?
Foreign investments. Another tourism that's
Yeah,
moving
that's
into
all.
real estate tourism.
There's still
The amount
100
of
years
foreigners that are investing here in
behind, so.
Dominican Republic. A lot of those projects, that Blue Mall was actually designed by Venezuelans.
That's
So
crazy.
a lot of the malls, you have a lot of people from Venezuela that left Venezuela because of the social unrest, because of the economic state, have come to Dominican Republic and have invested a lot of money in these projects. we're coming up to a really nice view. This is kind of like the peak of the mountain. As you can tell, it's gotten much cooler up here. See, like, and this is another example right here. We're in the middle of nowhere, but look how nice these little restaurants are. Yeah. Entrepreneurship is live here. Like, we are literally right now in the middle of nowhere.
As night approached and as we drove to the capital city of Santo Domingo, I was surprised to see some insanely bougie malls, stores, cars, and hotels.
We got the Maybach, we got the Mercedes-Benz, we got the Louis Vuitton. This reminds me of the Vegas Strip, it's that bougie. Who would have thought? A couple hours ago we were in the hood, now we got Louis Vuitton, we got Tudor, we got Mont Blanc. We got money out here. I'm not sure where the money's from. 20, 30 minutes away, 42, right here. You can buy a Rolex. Okay, we're going to the food festival right now. We saw a ton of cars coming back into Santo Domingo. What's happening?
One thing about here in DR that I love is the work-life balance, like I mentioned earlier. Santo Domingo is a hectic city, but one thing that people do here, Friday after work, they go to the beach, they go to the mountains, and as you can see right now, it's 7:20 in the evening. People are coming back home, get ready for the work week, and then tomorrow, the chaos ensues with the traffic here in Santo Domingo. Okay, another thing, look at these parking attendants. These are parking attendants right here. See how they're trying to, you see? These guys don't have any permits for any of this, right? They want to give you a parking spot. They don't have permits. It's not their business, right?
Okay.
But you still have to tip them.
Sure.
Right? And they get pissed if you don't tip them.
Why do the people drive so crazy out here?
I mean, look at this. Look at the motorcycle. Look at that motorcycle.
Yeah, so the use of space is highly efficient here, right? You don't see any inches unused on the roads. Look at how tight we are. Would you say the DR right now is developing or third world?
No, it's developing. The IMF said, if I'm not mistaken, by 2032 or 2036, quote me on that, if Dominican Republic continues at the pace that it is, it'll be considered a first world country.
Whoa. Yeah, that's big, right? For the Caribbean and compared to Haiti.
Oh, yeah.
Night and day difference.
Night and day. It's night and day. I mean, Haiti is the
It's
poorest
never gonna
country
happen
in the
because
Western
they are
Hemisphere.
corrupt as fuck.
Earlier
I
this
know
year,
it.
Dominican Republic got
I
ranked
was
the
not there,
number
but I
one
know.
place for mental health and happiness in the world. This
All
is
the
the
information
largest
trust me,
food
I'm
festival
doctor.
in all of Dominican Republic. You have 30 of the best restaurants here, and it's an experience that if you come to Dominican Republic and this event's going on, you have to come here. The first thing is people think that this place is dangerous. As someone who came from the States, I don't see this on a Sunday. We've been driving around the city. You've seen people outside. You've seen people sitting outside the colmados. You've seen kids running around being kids. Things that you don't see in the States in today's day and age. They say that in Dominican Republic, you can't go out with like your cell phones. You can't do things. And look at us right now. We're recording. We have our mics on. And as you can tell, one thing
That's
about
so
Dominican
big.
Republic, it's very family oriented. Notice how many kids here are on their phones or on tablets. I want you to observe. And that's why I always say money doesn't buy
Because they don't have
happiness. Living in
tablets.
Dominican Republic, it's proven to me because people that have nothing, no water, no power, none of those things are happier than maybe you and I that make a shitload of money.
Sure. Hola, amigos.
Estamos preguntando a la gente cuánto más o menos uno gana aquí en República Dominicana.
Yo produje hoy 40 globos hoy domingo. Yo trabajo los viernes, sábado, domingo y lunes. De 8 de la noche hasta las 12 de la noche.
¿Cuánto tú vendes al día?
Si se venden los 40 globos, 14,000 pesos dominicanos, equivalente casi a $300.
So he's making $75 an hour.
Pretty much.
Can you ask him if he thinks it's easy or hard to be an entrepreneur here in the DR?
Fácil.
¿Fácil? ¿Por qué?
Fácil porque uno busca la idea, la visualiza, la ejecuta y la pone. Si a la gente le gusta, le da bien.
What do you think the limiting factor to like getting out of the mud out here is?
La pobreza mental muchas veces. Porque si tiene una idea y sale con un emprendimiento, entonces va a cambiar la vida.
We have a free market here, we have low regulations, and we have guys like him who are tenacious.
And they're doing it the legal way. He has his permits, he's paying his fees, and he's not making millions of dollars. But if you notice, $300 in a
20
day is
years
not
ago,
bad.
you
Yeah, he's
wouldn't
making
get
10 grand a month
to 20
almost.
years
How much
old.
do you make a month?
Más o menos yo me gano como 50,000 pesos.
I know, let's have a grand.
Dang.
Tú trabajas los 7 días a la semana.
Ahora en diciembre se trabaja 7 días a semana, porque hay
Whatever.
mucha gente. Por ahí a veces con uno, cosas así, que la temporada baja. Diario, uno te gana 4,000
Life is so unfair.
It's about like $80-$90.
Y los 10 semanas uno te
It's
gana
all
8,
a
9, hasta
roll
10.
of
Would
dice.
you ever take your business to the United States,
The
or is it
moment
better
you're
to run a
born.
business here in DR?
Claro que sí. Esa es mi mente, coger para allá.
¿A dónde en los Estados Unidos?
Yo tengo familia en el Bronx.
Muchos Dominicans there?
Dominicanos.
Okay.
Are you born in
interesante.
shit?
There's a perceived sense of safety in the States that you
Or your
have that
parents
maybe
had
you don't
money?
have here.
No, I think it's vice versa. Over there, I feel more threatened than I do here.
What ways?
Over there, I don't feel safe going to a shopping center. I don't feel safe going to a concert because mass shooting is a thing over there.
And then you
There's
get,
never been a mass shooting here. The worst that's going to happen
punished
here is they're going to take your wallet and your cell
for
phone and
getting
you're
born
going to
into
get on your
shit
way,
as well.
right?
That's if you get robbed.
I send my daughters to school with a peace of mind every single day. I don't have to worry about some crazy
Prejudice
person walking
and
in there with an AR and shooting it up. Kids are learning values. They're not, you know,
Racism.
being pushed certain agendas that they are back in the States.
People are eating their third,
Ain't the
fourth
world a
meal,
beautiful
hanging out with
place?
family, vibing, social, right above the supermarket. So, oh, muchas gracias. Oh, sancocho. Muchas gracias. 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 Woo! Pregunta para ti. Trying to lose my cigar virginity. Lo siento. Ah, interesante. Ah, okay.
Pull. All right. Hey,
You don't swallow it. You've shown us all around this country. Where can the people find you? Stay informed on everything Dominican Republic and all your ventures.
Check me out on Instagram and YouTube, Jay Gives Back. We're out here showing a different side of Dominican Republic. I want to thank you for taking the time coming out here, seeing La 42, checking out the progress and what the Dominican Republic has improved on.
They haven't done shit, dude. Shameless lies. Of course they have a little bit more running water now. It would be a fucking... That would be absolutely ludicrous to think that that didn't improve.
Can a documentary be so real, so terrifying that it gets banned? Well, many documentary films have been banned for that exact reason. But it makes you wonder, what's in those documentaries that makes them too disturbing to watch? These are documentaries banned for being too disturbing, ranked from the least shocking to the most shocking. I'm Visual Venture, and you are awesome. Mondo Kane. When Mondo Kane came out, it was called the world's first shockumentary, and that wasn't a compliment. A shockumentary is a documentary meant to shock and disgust its audience. The more disgusted the audience is, the better the shockumentary. So the question is, what was in Mondo Kane that made it so disgusting?
Mondo Kane is a spectacle as big as the eye can see.
Mondo Kane was produced in 1962 by a team of Italian filmmakers. Initially, they told everyone that they were making a documentary about different cultures around the world. That sounded innocent enough. However, people began to realize that this was no ordinary documentary when they first heard the title Mondo Kane. Mondo Kane is an Italian phrase that literally translates to dog world. But it wasn't just about the dogs, it had a much darker meaning. The director titled the documentary Dog World to show that humans can be just as wild and cruel as animals. In this case, Dog World meant a harsh world where people acted like beasts, kind of like saying a dog-eat-dog world. Mondo Kane wasn't just about different cultures from around the world, it focused on the most violent and disturbing practices. It was a collection of footage displaying mankind at its most depraved and perverse. Once the documentary was ready, posters popped up all over Italy inviting people to watch it in theaters.
Hurry! They're just in time, friends, to see the most sensational, the most colossal attraction ever witnessed by the human eye.
Even though the ads warned about how unsettling the movie was, people wanted to see it for themselves. But they weren't ready for what they witnessed when Mondo Kane finally aired in theaters. The film premiered in Italy on March 30th, 1962, and it was 108 minutes of non-stop shock. It showed the filmmakers traveling the world, capturing the most gruesome footage from different tribes. The documentary opened with a chilling disclaimer. All the scenes that you will see in this film are true. If they are shocking, it's only because there are many shocking things in this world.
The duty of a reporter is not to make the truth seem sweeter, but to show things as they really are.
And they weren't kidding. In one scene, women were fattened up with food until they weighed over 264 pounds. Then they were offered as wives to the village dictator. There was a religious ceremony where villagers walked in a parade while holding live snakes. Another scene showed people burning money during a funeral so the deceased person could take the money into the afterlife.
Here, after hundreds of dark centuries, men discover for the first time in their lives that they have a doubt.
The film also included scenes of animals being treated badly. Mondo Kane definitely delivered on its promise. It was shocking, disgusting, and soon everyone was talking about it.
Mondo Kane. People all over the world are talking about Mondo Kane. For Mondo Kane has more in it to talk about than any picture ever before seen.
But the same thing that made the documentary famous also led to its downfall. When Mondo Kane became the talk of the town, it also generated a lot of controversy. The first problem? Critics hated it. They called it gross and uncivilized. And with very graphic scenes, it's easy to see why. But that wasn't the only issue. Soon, people started to wonder if everything in the documentary was actually real. There were rumors that some scenes were staged or edited to make things look worse than they really were. The filmmakers were also accused of exploiting the tribes they they filmed. Critics said they were only showing this footage to make money without caring about the cultures they were showing. And as more people watched it, the backlash got stronger. Many countries banned the documentary. For instance, Mondo Cane was banned in the UK because some scenes showed animals being treated inappropriately. The filmmakers defended their work, saying that they were just showing the world as it really is. Now, more than 60 years later, Mondo Cane is still one of the most disturbing documentaries ever made, and it's still banned in many places to this day. This audience review on Rotten Tomatoes says this is still the quintessential shockumentary. If you have a strong stomach, watch
not really
this
watching,
flick, but if you have any hesitations, hold back.
just run on
Mondo
one of the
Cane was so
monitors.
strange that people called it crazy, but this next documentary actually featured people who were diagnosed as crazy. Mondo Cane and these documentaries to come show us an unsettling view of the world. When the world feels overwhelming, something as simple as enjoying a meal without the stress of cooking can make all the difference. Be honest guys, I don't cook. I mean, I guess if you count cereal, but for actual meals, Factor is a lifesaver. Factor delivers chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals right to your door. You can choose from over 35 different meals per week with options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, and more. Something that I think is really cool is that they now offer smoothies and juices. In my opinion, smoothies are the quickest way to get a lot of nutrients in your body with the least amount of effort. And I am all about the least amount of effort. Creating these videos for you guys is practically a job I do almost every waking hour, 7 days a week. So warming up a well-balanced, nutritious meal to be ready in 2 minutes comes in clutch. And with Christmas around the corner, it makes a great Christmas present, especially to your friends and family who are too busy to cook. Make sure you guys click my link below to get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box, and 20% off your next month of orders with my discount code VISUAL50. Big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. Titty Cut Follies. Imagine spending 29 days inside a mental hospital in the 60s filming everything you see. That's what happened in 1966 when the crew of Titty Cut Follies recorded 80 hours of raw footage showing what happens inside a mental hospital. But before the public could see what they filmed, the documentary was banned. There were powerful men who tried so hard to keep this documentary buried. But why? The story of Titty Cut Follies started in 1966 when Frederick Wiseman made a huge decision. He was going to quit his job as a lawyer and become a filmmaker. Wiseman wanted his first project to be a documentary, but he chose a really weird place to film, the Bridgewater State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Massachusetts. Although it had never been done before, Wiseman somehow convinced the head of the mental hospital to allow him to film there. But there was one condition: the camera crew would have to be followed by hospital staff at all times during filming. They agreed and the filming began, but if the filmmakers knew the depravity waiting inside the hospital, they never would have gone in.
Next, let's go. Quincy.
Bridgewater wasn't just any hospital. It held patients who committed crimes but also had serious mental illnesses, making it hard for them to understand right from wrong. Instead of going to regular prisons, they were sent to places like Bridgewater to get treatment. This meant the inmates were dangerous criminals. But when the cameras started rolling, the crew was shocked at how helpless these so-called dangerous criminals really were. Bridgewater Hospital was run more like a prison than a hospital. Instead of being treated, the inmates were bullied, humiliated, and neglected by the staff. The inmates were also left in unhygienic conditions. It was clear that the staff had no sympathy for them. One of the most haunting scenes in the documentary showed an inmate being force-fed while a guard made fun of him. Wiseman tried to stay professional even though what he saw deeply disturbed him. The way the patients were treated was wrong, but the staff didn't seem to care that the camera was catching all of it.
With the help of cameraman John Marshall, the two-man team recorded interviews between patients and staff, daily rituals such as the cleaning of patients' rooms, and interactions between the inmates.
The crew spent 29 days filming the horrors inside Bridgewater and then spent a year editing the footage into an 84-minute film. The documentary didn't have any narration, interviews, or explanations. It just showed what life was really like inside the hospital, leaving it up to the viewer to make sense of it. When the documentary was finally ready, Wiseman couldn't wait for people to see the truth about Bridgewater. He arranged for it to be premiered premiered at the 1967 New York Film Festival. Everything was set to go, but then, just before the premiere, something unexpected happened. A powerful group suddenly showed up and tried to stop the documentary from being shown to the public. As the premiere date approached, rumors started spreading that Titicut Follies contained unsettling footage of the patients being mistreated. That's when the Massachusetts government realized they could be in big trouble. If people saw the horrible things happening in the film, families of the inmates might sue them. After all, it was the government's job to make sure the hospital was running properly. And so the Massachusetts governor and other top officials took the film to court to prevent it from being shown. Their official reason, they said the documentary violated the patient's privacy and dignity. They also accused Wiseman of breaking an oral contract that was supposed to give the government control over what could be shown. But the director Wiseman wasn't going to give up easily. He wanted the world to see what really happened in the hospital, and he was ready to fight for it. Remember, he was a lawyer before he became a filmmaker. This kicked off a long legal battle between one filmmaker and the Massachusetts government. Wiseman won the first victory when a New York state court allowed the documentary to be shown at the film festival. But ultimately, he was no match for the might of the Massachusetts government. In 1968, a Massachusetts judge ordered Titicut Follies to be pulled from theaters and for all copies to be destroyed, claiming once again that it violated the privacy and dignity of the patients shown in the documentary. This was the first time a movie got banned in the United States for reasons other than obscenity, immorality, or national security concerns. It wasn't until over 20 years later, in 1991, that the court finally allowed it to be released. But there was one condition. The film had to include a statement explaining the changes and improvements had been made in Bridgewater since 1966. The War Game. The War Game wasn't just a documentary, it was a warning. Made in 1965, it showed what might happen if a nuclear bomb hit the United Kingdom. The documentary wasn't just about the explosion, it was about the chaos that would follow, the hunger, the violence, and the collapse of law and order. Because a nuclear attack never hit Britain, the director Peter Watkins had to use his imagination when making the documentary. He envisioned how the government would respond, how people would react, and what the aftermath would look like after a nuclear attack. So, why would someone make a documentary like this? Most documentaries are made because the director is passionate about the topic, but this one was different. Peter Watkins, the director, didn't want to make a film about a nuclear attack. His bosses at the BBC made him do it. The BBC, or British Broadcasting Corporation, was like the official TV network of Britain. Their job was to keep people informed. In 1965, the British public was worried about what would happen if a nuclear bomb hit the United Kingdom. In response to these fears, the BBC asked filmmaker Peter Watkins to create a documentary that would explore this terrifying possibility. The BBC didn't just want to talk about what could happen, they wanted to show it. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but things didn't go as planned. Because the documentary Peter Watkins created was so terrifying, it was banned. Peter Watkins, who was only 29, was one of the best documentary filmmakers in Britain. He was so talented that people said he could make films in the same sort of way that Mozart could compose music. In other words, Peter Watkins was a genius. When the BBC ordered Watkins to make a scary documentary about a nuclear attack, he took it very seriously, maybe too seriously. He worked with scientists, experts, and government officials to make the war game as realistic as possible.
9:16 a.m. A single megaton nuclear missile overshoots Manston Airfield in Kent and airbursts 6 miles from this position.
The documentary showed people hiding in fear, neighborhoods destroyed, and people becoming ill. There were also scenes of citizens looting shops, firestorms, and whole cities reduced to rubble. Food supplies run out and the police are armed. Even those who escaped injury go into a state of fear and shock from the things they've seen. Throughout the documentary, a narrator explains how these events could really happen if a nuclear war occurred.
December the 25th. A refugee compound in Dover, Kent. 4 months after the attack.
Watkins worked hard on the project. He used 350 actors, skilled video editing, and dramatic sound effects to create a masterpiece. When Watkins finished the war game documentary, he proudly presented it to his bosses at the BBC. He thought they'd be impressed, maybe even reward him for doing such a great job, but the response he got was much harsher. The BBC, who asked him to make the film, refused to air it on TV. They decided to bury the documentary to make sure no one ever saw it. The official reason for this decision? They claimed the documentary was too terrifying and would cause panic among the public. In an official statement, the BBC insisted that it had reached this decision on its own and without outside pressure of any kind. Watkins was devastated, but there was nothing he could do because the BBC owned the rights to the video. Watkins was so upset that he resigned. However, people started to wonder if the BBC's reason was the whole truth. Was it really banned for being too scary, or was there more to it? Well, declassified government documents later revealed the truth. After Watkins completed the documentary, he handed it over to the BBC. The BBC then invited top British government officials to watch it before it was shown on television. This turned out to be a huge mistake because the government officials hated it. The documentary showed the British government completely falling apart during a nuclear attack, unable to help citizens. It made the government look weak and unprepared. If the British public saw the movie, they would lose faith in the government's ability to protect them. The declassified documents revealed that even the Prime Minister of Britain heard about the documentary and didn't like it. And so, the government pressured the BBC to keep the documentary hidden from the entire country. Although the BBC couldn't air it on British TV, they allowed the documentary to be shown at several film festivals abroad. For 20 years, the ban on the war game stayed in place. It wasn't until 1985, about 20 years later, that the BBC finally aired it on TV. In those 2 decades, the war game became legendary. People heard it through word of mouth and wanted to see what was so terrifying about it that it couldn't be shown on television. Today, the war game has a score of 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, which just proves how amazing it is. This next documentary was so dangerous that the entire crew almost lost their lives. The Cove. The Cove is a disturbing documentary about a hidden cove in Taiji, Japan. A cove is kind of like a small beach surrounded by rocks or cliffs. But why make a documentary about this particular cove? It's because of the awful things that happen there.
That's a dolphin's worst nightmare, right there.
Every year, fishermen drive dolphins into the secret cove. Once trapped, the dolphins are captured. The lucky ones are sold to marine parks around the world. But for the dolphins that aren't sold, a much darker fate awaits them. They're harvested for their meat, which is then sold as food. The dolphins are highly intelligent and social creatures, and many people believe they shouldn't be eaten. In fact, many organizations have banned the hunting of all dolphins. Also, the method of hunting in Taiji is considered exceptionally cruel. However, each year, the dolphin hunt continues in this cove and thousands are captured using brutal methods. The fishermen of Taiji didn't want anyone finding out what they were doing, so they kept the cove under tight security. Armed men guarded the area and they wouldn't hesitate to take anyone out who tried to get in. The cove was also surrounded by wire fences and keep out signs.
You'll see the signs, keep out, danger. There are fishermen walking around these hills with knives.
On many occasions, local fishermen have gotten physical with journalists who try to record what goes on in the cove. Even the local police helped hide what was going on.
The fishermen told me, they said if the world finds out what goes on here, we'll be shut down.
For decades, this cruel hunt was kept a secret from the world. That was until dolphin activist Rick O'Barry heard about it. He wanted the world to know how dolphins were being treated in Japan. But the real question was, would he risk his life to expose the truth? Rick O'Barry wasn't always a dolphin activist. In fact, he was once the guy who made dolphins popular on TV. In the 1960s, Rick trained dolphins for the TV show Flipper. He spent years teaching dolphins to perform tricks and entertain crowds. But everything changed after one of his beloved dolphins passed away. Rick realized that keeping dolphins in captivity was cruel, and he dedicated his life to freeing them. When Rick and his team of activists found out about the dolphin hunt in Taiji, they decided to make a documentary exposing the truth. But they knew it wasn't going to be easy.
The town Taiji in Japan is very fierce in protecting its secret.
Rick O'Barry and his team knew they couldn't just stroll in with their cameras. To get footage for their documentary, they would need to act like spies in a Hollywood movie. So they came up with a plan. Rick recruited an elite force of specialist divers, surfers, and underwater cameramen and special effects creators in order to expose the cove. Rick and his team entered Japan pretending to be tourists, blending in to avoid suspicion. Once they reached the town of Taiji, they executed the toughest part of their plan.
And so we've snuck in the middle of the night. Yeah. We set the cameras. These are prototypes of the first hard drive cameras ever made. We set those in the cove and my team went to bed.
The divers moved through the water quickly, placing hidden cameras disguised as rocks around the cove in the middle of the night. They also set up high-tech gear like underwater microphones to capture the sound during the hunt.
Right. And I was hanging from a rope with black paint on like a ninja, and then we had to come back the next night to retrieve them. When I was hanging from the rope, I had a camera, so I'm watching it through the lens.
The footage from the hidden cameras showed hundreds of dolphins being captured, and it was so brutal that it was hard to watch. But the footage didn't just capture the hunt. It also exposed something else too. The dolphin meat being sold in Japan was contaminated with high levels of mercury, which is dangerous. Eating meat contaminated with mercury over a long period can cause mercury poisoning, which can be fatal. When the cove was released in 2009, the graphic scenes showing dolphins being hunted made people sick. Viewers were angry and activists demanded an end to dolphin hunting. But not everyone was happy that the documentary was out.
The film has drawn criticism in Japan from protesters labeling it anti-Japanese.
The government believed the documentary hurt their reputation and gave a false impression of their culture. Unlike many Western countries, dolphin hunting wasn't illegal in Japan. Fishermen in Taiji also argued that the film was an attack on their way of life. Due to all the backlash, the documentary was unofficially banned in Japan. Whenever a screening was planned, protesters would show up and force the event to be canceled. Some politicians even threatened people trying to show it in theaters. On top of that, the company with the rights to air the documentary in Japan got sued by someone in the film. But eventually, a few theaters in Japan managed to show the documentary. Unfortunately, dolphin hunting still happens in Taiji today, but the cove shined a spotlight on the issue. The next documentary was so controversial that it angered one of the world's most ruthless dictators. Now, the creators of the film have to live in fear. The Red Chapel. Red Chapel is one of those documentaries that feels more like a spy movie than a regular documentary. Released in 2009, it begins with a wild idea. A team of Danish filmmakers wanted to travel to North Korea to make a documentary about life under a dictatorship. If you know anything about North Korea, you'll realize how dangerous that idea was. North Korea is one of the most oppressive places in the world. The government controls every aspect of people's lives. Basic freedoms like the right to speak your mind or practice religion are heavily restricted. In North Korea, people have been arrested for seemingly ordinary things like having the wrong hairstyle, watching foreign TV shows, and wearing jeans. Things are so strict that even falling asleep when the dictator is making a speech can lead to a death sentence.
Wow.
North Korea seemed like the perfect place to make a documentary about dictatorship. But there was one big problem. They didn't allow visitors. To enter the country, you needed special permission from the government, and there was no way they'd let anyone in to come and film a documentary on dictatorship. The filmmakers knew they couldn't tell the truth, so they lied. They pretended to be part of a cultural exchange program, claiming that they were bringing a fun comedy show to entertain the North Korean people. They also expressed how much they admired the North Korean dictator.
Two Danish Korean comedians, and they have come here to give pleasure to your people and pay tribute to your powerful and wonderful society.
Surprisingly, the North Korean government let them in. But from the moment they arrived, it was clear things wouldn't go as planned. The North Korean government, suspicious of foreigners, kept a close eye on the group and controlled their every move. They were assigned a handler named Mrs. Pak, who made sure they only saw what the government wanted them to see. And the most difficult part was that they had to perform an actual comedy show.
A cat.
Pussy or with?
In English you can say pussycat or cat. It's you know, a cat. Meow.
But they also had to film a documentary. So they told the government handler that they were recording their trip to show the world how great North Korea was. But in reality, they planned to use their footage to expose how tough life was in that country. This was incredibly risky. If the government discovered their real plan, the filmmakers could be thrown in prison or worse. They performed their comedy act, taking every chance to film situations that revealed the harsh reality of life in North Korea. However, as they kept filming, they started to wonder if they were doing the right thing. They realized they were putting North Korean citizens in danger just by talking to them. Because if anyone was caught saying something bad about the government, they could face severe punishment. After finishing their comedy performances, they left North Korea and turned their footage into the documentary The Red Chapel. It was shown at multiple film festivals and got a lot of praise. But obviously not everyone was happy about it. The Red Chapel was banned in North Korea for mocking the regime. North Korean officials accused the director of lying to get into their country and even called him an animal. Even though the Red Chapel is still banned in North Korea, it won multiple awards around the world. The topic of our next documentary is something that affects everyone, but the way it was filmed was so graphic that people were too afraid to watch it. The act of seeing with one's own eyes. Have you ever wondered what happens to your physical body when you pass away? This documentary tried to answer that question but ended up creating one of the most disturbing documentaries ever made. Entitled The Act of Seeing with One's Own Eyes, the documentary takes viewers to a place most would never dare to go, a morgue. And the camera keeps filming as real autopsies are performed on real bodies. So why would someone make a documentary showing real autopsies? It starts to make sense once you learn more about the guy who made it. The director, Stan Brakhage, wasn't your average filmmaker. He was an experimental filmmaker known for breaking the rules. Stan loved to talk about deep topics that pushed people out of their comfort zones. In 1971, Stan decided to make a documentary about autopsies because he believed people needed to face the harsh reality that everyone one day would pass away. The title, The Act of Seeing with One's Own Eyes, is a literal translation of the term autopsy. The word autopsy is derived from the Greek autopsia, meaning to see for oneself. But how did he get permission to film a morgue? Today, this would be almost impossible, but in 1971, when Stan made the film, things were different. He somehow convinced a morgue in Pittsburgh to let him film the autopsies. However, Stan had to promise not to show the faces of the deceased. In the documentary, Brakhage shows morgue workers performing autopsies. There's no music, no narration, no explanation, just raw graphic footage of what really happens. Because the footage was so graphic, the documentary couldn't be shown to the general public. Censorship boards thought it was too disturbing and would upset the audience. Without narration or educational content, people couldn't really see it as a typical documentary. Maybe if it had some explanations or scientific information, it would have been considered educational. Since most theaters refused to show it, The Act of Seeing with One's Own Eyes was screened mostly at film festivals and private events. Over time, it became known as one of the most unsettling documentaries ever made. Calling this next documentary horrifying doesn't do it justice. It's one of the worst things ever caught on film. Cannibal Holocaust. Imagine a documentary so shocking that the director was arrested for making it. And the crazy part, he was arrested because people thought he ended someone's life live on camera. The documentary at the center of all this drama was called Cannibal Holocaust. So why did the director create something so controversial? It all started back in 1979 when an American film crew set out to make a documentary about the tribes living deep in the Amazon rainforest. But there was something especially dangerous about the tribe they wanted to investigate. They were cannibals. It wasn't the smartest idea to wander into a forest looking for a tribe known for eating people, but that's exactly what these filmmakers did. The team, made up of a director, a writer, and 2 cameramen, traveled from the US and began their journey through the thick Amazon rainforest. It didn't end well. Those 4 documentary filmmakers were never heard from again. Most people assumed the worst, that they were captured and eaten by the tribe they went to film. But others believed the filmmakers might still be alive, lost somewhere in the jungle.
4 Americans plunge into the savagery of the Amazon jungle to film a documentary. They never come back. Are they still alive? If so, where are they?
Months later, an American professor formed a rescue team to track down the missing filmmakers in the Amazon forest. But any hope of finding them alive vanished when the rescue team found the skeletal remains of the filmmakers with their film reels in the forest. The rescue team brought the reels back to America and watched the footage, but nothing could prepare them for what they saw. The tapes revealed in gruesome detail how the filmmakers were taken out by the tribes they went to study. Yet after seeing this horrifying footage, the team made a bizarre decision. They decided to release the film to the public. Cannibal Holocaust didn't hold back. It shocked audiences with its graphic scenes showing the filmmakers losing their lives. At the premiere, people were horrified. Many couldn't sit through the whole thing. After its release in 1980, the documentary quickly was banned in over 50 countries because of its content. But here's the twist. There was something viewers didn't realize. It was a fake documentary. Everything was staged. The whole thing was actually a movie.
I swear I cannot believe. I actually still think it's a snuff
made
movie.
to look like a documentary. The
They just
director
gotten away
even
with it because
promoted it
it's
as
so
a
old, the old
documentary
times.
and used a found footage style of
Like
filmmaking to make viewers feel like they were watching real events.
They even said the killing of the turtle was fake.
The documentary world,
Nah, man.
Deodato had skillfully persuaded audiences into thinking they were watching real, uncut scenes.
When the director announced that it was all fake, it surprisingly made the situation far worse because people refused to believe that it was fake. The scenes were so realistic that viewers thought the actors who lost their lives in the film were actually killed.
The way they faked that scene and other scenes in the movie were, something that Hollywood special effects guys probably couldn't duplicate with millions of dollars.
Things got so serious that the police stepped in. The director was arrested by Italian authorities and charged with murder. Even though he tried to explain that it was just a movie, the cops didn't buy it. They planned to use the film as proof that he was guilty. And it didn't help that the director made the actor sign
That's such a
contracts
flex,
to not
actually,
go
dude.
out in public for a year after the film's release, all to make it seem like it was a real documentary.
crazy.
To avoid a life sentence, the director Deodato had to bring the actors to court to prove that they were still alive and explained how he used special effects to fake the death.
Imagine.
The actors also appeared on an Italian TV show together to prove to the entire country that they were in fact alive.
Deodato was pretty much a genius at the way he tried to fool the audience with the camera running out of film and stuff like that. Yeah, he was very clever.
Even the native tribe shown in the movie wasn't real. Many of the so-called natives were just local actors hired from nearby towns. The backstory was fake too. No filmmakers were lost in the Amazon and no rescue mission was ever launched. It was all just a stunt to get people to watch this movie. The problem was that it worked so well that Deodato almost went to prison for life.
As unpleasant as the film is and as crude as it is, he does have a pretty good grip of the cinematic technique.
So why did Deodato make such a controversial film? He had a reason, though it didn't exactly make sense. He claimed he wanted to criticize how the media sensationalizes crime and violence to boost ratings. Deodato accused Italian news of showing real violent footage just for attention, and he wanted to show how wrong that was. But his explanation didn't calm people down. The violent scenes were too realistic that it remained banned in over 50 countries, even though everyone knew it was a movie. Earthlings. The Earthlings documentary had one goal: to expose the ways animals are used for food, clothing, and scientific research. But the footage isn't easy to watch. The documentary's director, Sean Monson, came up with the idea while working on a commercial about spaying and neutering pets. During that time, he stumbled upon the horrible conditions in slaughterhouses and other industries that used animals. What he saw was so disturbing that he felt like it was his duty to let the world see it. However, that was not going to be easy. The million-dollar companies running these industries wanted to keep everything quiet. If the world saw what was really going on in the factories and labs, it could destroy their business, and they weren't about to let that happen without a fight. To make Earthlings, Sean Monson used hidden cameras to gather footage from places like factory farms, research labs, and even circuses. The footage was raw and intense, but it revealed the truth. The message was that animals are living beings, not just objects, and they deserve kindness and respect. Many who watch Earthlings were inspired to change their lifestyles, opting for vegan diets or avoiding products tested on animals. Because of its graphic content, some theaters and streaming services banned Earthlings because it was just too disturbing. However, the documentary found its audience online, where people could watch it for free and share it with others. Today, Earthlings is considered one of the most popular documentaries ever made about the ethical treatment of animals. These documentaries show us just how dark the world can be. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling truths are the ones we need to hear. Visual Venture. Wait, before you guys go, make sure you guys subscribe and then click here to watch more dark internet documentaries. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers. Let's go. Love you guys. Peace.
I got the most insane sickest layout coming, dude. Oh my god. Should we reveal it? Or tomorrow? Oh god, it's gonna be so good.
From mobile phones to CCTV, every day millions of videos are recorded. Most capture the ordinary, but you know how these videos start. Just sometimes, someone will hit that record button and capture something far more unsettling. They'll capture a clip right before horror. My name's Ryan from Tragedy Tales, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're diving back into the darker end of the internet to showcase 5 more clips captured moments before horror. From a family parasailing trip that went horrifically wrong, to the man who took out his frustrations in the worst way possible. As you're all accustomed to on this channel, this week we've got clips that are guaranteed to shock you to your core. So you guys know the drill. Strap in and draw the curtains, and let's get right into it. The Florida Keys, located in Monroe County, Florida, is a tropical chain of islands often seen as paradise for families. Nestled between the Gulf Coast of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, these islands are connected by the iconic overseas highway, offering breathtaking views of the turquoise water and vibrant coral reefs below. The islands are a place where families come to snorkel, kayak, and parasail. They flock here in their numbers to create unforgettable memories together. But if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know that paradise can also be perilous. Fun can turn to tragedy in an instant, and sadly, this entry is yet another example. It begins in the middle of the Florida Keys, specifically in the city of Marathon, near Pigeon Key Island, on Monday, May the 30th, 2022. On this beautiful summer day, 33-year-old Suparaja Alapathi from Illinois was enjoying her holiday in the Florida Keys with 10 to 12 other members of her family. Eager to make the most out of their holiday, they decided to try something completely out of the ordinary. They decided to push the boat out and book a parasailing trip. They searched online and booked the trip with what they thought to be a reputable place. They booked the trip for the whole family, and with the price seeming reasonable, the excitement was palpable as they prepared to go out into the water. The parasailing company, called Lighthouse Parasail, arranged the outing, and that day the entire family lined up across the waterfront, eager to head out into the skies. At around 5:30 p.m., which to be fair is quite late to do any parasailing, Subaraja, along with her husband Serini, as well as their 10-year-old son and their 7-year-old nephew, climbed aboard a boat and headed out into the water. As they did, the weather that was initially calm soon began to deteriorate. Winds picked up and dark clouds now loomed above. Despite this, it all seemed manageable as the boat powered out into the open water. This weather wasn't going to stop them parasailing. Once they got to the spot, Subaraja as well as the 2 children slipped into their harnesses, while the husband, Serini, decided to stay on the boat to watch and record some footage. All on video, they can be seen laughing and joking, enjoying the fresh sea breeze. None of them could have predicted what was about to unfold. All captured on video, you can see as the boat picked up speed, and the trio gracefully rose up into the air. They were flying, but not for long. Soon after they set off, as I said, the weather shifted dramatically. The temperature dropped sharply by 10 degrees Celsius, and winds escalated from gentle breezes to powerful, unpredictable blasts. The boat began veering far off course as the approaching storm on the horizon grew nearer and nearer by the second. The parasail that was soaring above the boat was now completely out of control. All 3 of them were being whipped back and forth like ragdolls, completely at the mercy of the erratic wind.
Jeez.
Now, this storm had been forecast, and it even had warnings in place. But Captain Daniel Couch, who had organized the trip and took them out on the boat, only focused on the money. All he could think about is taking these 10 people into the air, how much money he would make from it, and so he ignored the warning signs. As the group were violently swept about by the wind, the captain tried to regain control by accelerating. But by now, it was far too late. The parasail, instead of being towed, was now dragging the boat wherever it saw fit. The wind, relentless and unpredictable, was now completely in control. Serini, the husband, could do nothing but watch in horror as the 3 of them were pulled higher and higher into the sky. They were heading right towards land. At this point, Captain Couch was now panicking. Within just minutes, they'd been dragged very close to shore, and with no way to regain control, fearing a collision with the land, he made a rash decision. In a split second, he pulled out a knife and cut the tow line, leaving Subaraja, her son, and nephew to fall into the water below, still tethered to the inflated parasail. What followed was terrifying. The wind dragged the parasail across the cold, choppy waters at breakneck speed. Helpless, they were tossed in and out of the water, unable to stop themselves as they were pulled towards the infamous 7-mile bridge.
Oh my god.
Desperately, on the boat, Serini clung to Daniel's legs and begged him to go and save his family, pleading with him, saying, "Go after them, please." And Daniel's response was just, "Don't worry, the bridge will help." As the parasailers were dragged helplessly across the water, the rest of the family watched on shore in total terror. They could only watch as their family members were carried further and further out of sight. Just a horrible scene. By now, nearby boaters had noticed what had happened and raced to help them, but they were being dragged across the water just far too fast. No one could catch up with them before they violently collided with the 7-mile bridge. The impact was severe, leaving Subaraja as well as one of the children unconscious in the water. Now that's when John Callion, a nearby fishing boat captain, arrived at the scene. He pulled the victims from the water and began desperately performing CPR on Subaraja, who remained unconscious. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but sadly there was nothing that could be done, and she was pronounced dead at the scene, all while still being attached to the 2 children. While these 2 children survived with serious injuries, they were left with deep emotional scars from the harrowing experience. They nearly died as well. What could have been a thrilling family adventure turned into a nightmare within just minutes. A tragedy that could have been avoided with better safety protocols, careful planning, and most of all, a reasonable response from the captain when the weather turned dangerous. He made zero effort to try and catch them once he'd cut the rope. Instead, he just watched as they drifted along the water towards the bridge. What makes it worse is that he told the husband that the bridge would help, so he already saw what was about to happen before it did. In September, months after the incident, he was arrested on charges of manslaughter and multiple boating violations. He should have never gone out into the water that day. Daniel pleaded not guilty, and as of now, his trial has been delayed, awaiting further legal proceedings. While he awaits his trial, the Alaparthy family filed a lawsuit against Daniel Couch, as well as the parasailing company and the marina. The lawsuit claims that the company, as well as the marina, failed to check weather reports, which should have prevented the trip. They also pointed to the lack of safety equipment, such as life jackets, as well as the captain's failure to manage the parasail when the weather worsened. The lawsuit argues that several chances to prevent this tragedy were totally missed. Now, if safety is fully considered, parasailing accidents are very, very rare. However, as you've seen on this channel before, just due to the nature of the activity, when something does go wrong, it's often fatal. This tragedy, which caused the death of one and caused serious injuries to 2 children, serves as a brutal reminder of checking safety when you're doing high-risk activities, no matter where you are in the world. Double and triple check that they've got all the licenses in order, because this could happen to any one of us. There's so many companies that will just ignore risks for the sake of profit, and the consequences can be devastating. Daniel knew the risks that he was taking, but he did it just because he wanted some money, a decision that I'm sure he will regret. This frankly ridiculous entry begins on the 9th of August 2024 in the beautiful country of Argentina, Rosario. On that fateful summer's day in Rosario, life buzzed with the energy of workers and locals, blissfully unaware of the chaos that was soon to unfold. On the morning of August the 9th, a 46-year-old man named Juan Manuel Medina finally snapped. In the previous months, just due to budget cuts, Juan had been laid off from his job at the Air Liquid Facilities factory in Rosario. This factory supplies tanks of oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen for industry use, and while the layoff wasn't personal, Juan definitely took it personally. On the morning of August the 9th, Juan went to the local Rosario Aero Club and rented a Cessna 150 aircraft that was primarily used for flight training and personal use. As Juan was an active pilot and a respected and active member of the Aero Club, nobody suspected anything out of the ordinary as he did the preliminary checks on the runway. However, before renting the plane, Juan had made 2 cryptic posts on the work WhatsApp group, the first being the Nagasaki mushroom cloud, a very famous World War II photo, followed by a selfie with the caption in Spanish that read, "To the big liars." At 11:30, Juan took off from the Aero Club and began soaring into the sky. But not for long. Around noon, witnesses said that they saw the plane flying very strangely and circling the area of his former workplace. And then this terrifying footage was captured. A worker at the factory captured this video in the warehouse grounds. You can see that they're stood in the outhouse of the warehouse, and in the air you can see the 2-seater Cessna barreling towards the Air Liquid Facility factory. Within just a blink of an eye, the plane dropped out of the sky and impacted with the building, slamming right into a concrete column with an almighty bang. After crashing into the building, the plane came to a stop and no explosion occurred. Amazingly, Juan had narrowly avoided the highly flammable and explosive containers littered around. Now it was clear what Juan was trying to do here. He was trying to cause a chain reaction that would bring down the entire factory, killing anyone who was inside or nearby. Fire engines rushed to the scene, and Juan was dead in the cockpit, but amazingly no one else had been injured in this whole ordeal. They put out the small fires that he'd caused and prevented any further damage. The footage shocked the locals and even reached international news. The police believe all the signs pointed towards this being intentional. While Juan had his pilot's license, he had no permission to fly it over the city where he was. He said nothing to the Aero Club that day. One man's thirst for revenge almost cost many more people their lives, but thankfully he was unsuccessful. But it's tragic that it even got this far in the first place. This next clip was recorded in the northern Netherlands, in the city of Enschede, on Saturday, May the 13th, 2000. That weekend, it was completely normal for the residents of Enschede. The weather was nice, the streets were calm, it was a quiet weekend atmosphere. But that was all about to change. In the Roombeat neighborhood of Enschede, densely surrounded by homes where families lived, sat a large fireworks factory and storage facility known as SE Fireworks. Now I know what you're all thinking, having a fireworks factory so close to homes seems reckless, and that's because it was. This factory, built in 1977, produced and stored fireworks for decades. They would never build a fireworks factory so close nowadays, but when the factory was first constructed, it was actually on the outskirts of town and not surrounded by any homes whatsoever. However, as Enschede grew, residential neighborhoods like Roombeat were developed increasingly close to the factory, creating a deadly recipe for disaster. By the year 2000, approximately 1,500 to 2,000 people lived within close proximity to the factory, with some homes being as close to 50 to 100 meters away. On the afternoon of May the 13th, at approximately 3 p.m., a small fire erupted within the packing materials section of the factory. Emergency responders were quickly notified and rushed to the scene to tackle the blaze, but before they could even respond, the fire had already spread to nearby parts of the factory, also containing fireworks, sending them violently ricocheting, further spreading the blaze. Soon, several teams of firemen began tackling the fire with water hoses as a crowd gathered on the street to witness the spectacle. Despite the fire team's best efforts, the flames spread quickly through the factory's storage facilities, and by 3:15 p.m., explosions could be heard coming from within. Suddenly, at 3:35 p.m., a massive, devastating explosion occurred, one that nobody was expecting. It turns out that the fire had spread throughout the entire factory and even outside. Once it was outside, it spread to 2 full shipping containers that were being used to illegally store fireworks. Inside these containers were a staggering 177 tons of explosive fireworks just waiting to be ignited. As the fire reached these containers, they set fire to the contents inside, triggering a humongous explosion. Now, there was a few explosions before this that had a force equivalent to 0.8 tons of TNT, but the strength of this final explosion was estimated to be around 4 to 5 tons of TNT. Within literally a second, the blast ripped apart the factory, incinerated nearby cars, and flattened many homes and buildings within a 400-meter radius. Instantly, 18 people were killed, including 4 firefighters that were tackling the blaze. The blast was so powerful that it rattled and shook buildings as far as 40 miles away and left 946 people injured to varying extents. Hundreds of people were scorched in the explosion, but many also sustained broken bones, internal injuries, as well as gashes and laceration wounds from flying debris. The shockwave of the blast was so powerful that it caused temporary and permanent hearing loss for some victims, and even left a gaping crater in the ground.
Have you seen the explosion
After the dust had settled,
that happened in
people realized it was a complete
Lebanon,
catastrophe.
in Beirut?
First responders were
There's
overwhelmed
some
by the scale
live
of the destruction.
recordings.
The sheer scale of the
cannot
damage
imagine
was hard to comprehend.
being,
Residents
like,
who
next
survived
to
the
an explosion
explosion
like
were
this
left
would.
in shock. But despite this,
The
some who
shockwave
had
must
witnessed the
rattle you
disaster
through your core.
firsthand risked their own lives to assist
Crazy
in
shit,
rescue
dude.
efforts, digging through the rubble with their bare hands to help those injured. By now, the situation was far out of control. Fire crews struggled to tackle the fire, and so additional fire teams were called in across the border in Germany to help extinguish it. By the time it had been put out, an astronomical amount of damage had been caused. The blast essentially wiped out much of the Roombeat neighborhood and displaced hundreds of families. In total, almost 400 homes were destroyed, and another 1,500 were damaged and needed repairs. It resulted in $507 million worth of damage. While 18 were instantly killed in the explosion, by the end of this horrible ordeal, this incident stole the lives of 23 innocent individuals, making this one of the deadliest fireworks-related accidents in history. The fire and the explosion left a palpable sense of loss. An entire neighborhood had been reduced to ash. But for many, it wasn't just about the property or material things, it was about the families that had been shattered, families that will never ever recover from this. Questions arose as to why this factory was allowed to continue to run, despite being so close to residential homes. After officials investigated, they said that the factory was licensed to store around 175 tons of fireworks. This amount of fireworks was just sitting in the containers, let alone what was being produced and stored inside. While a true amount was never disclosed as to how much they were actually storing on site, it was clear that they had more than they were supposed to. To make things worse, they were also storing larger fireworks than they were allowed to do so. They lied on the import documentation, stating that these fireworks were smaller than they actually were, to save on shipping. This is why the entire neighborhood wasn't evacuated, as firefighters believed that they were tackling a fire at a factory with much smaller explosives. Even to this day, the exact cause of the fire remains unknown, though arson is still a strong suspect. Some believe it could have been one of the owners, as it was known that they would sometimes demonstrate small fireworks inside, but this was never proven. Shortly after the explosion, the two managers of the company handed themselves in over to the police and were eventually sentenced to 12 months in prison. A total of €8.5 million was issued in compensation, but none of this seems very just, considering the damage and deaths caused. Since the explosion, the Roombeek area has been rebuilt, Dutch fire safety regulations were made stricter, and several illegal fireworks storage facilities were shut down to prevent similar tragedies. This disaster led to greater awareness, as well as tighter regulations on the storage of fireworks, not just in the Netherlands, but all across Europe. The tragedy remains a somber chapter in Enschede's history. Every year, citizens remember the victims of the disaster, and while the area has been rebuilt, the scars of that day continue to linger. A memorial was constructed in a local area, consisting of a large stone structure featuring the names of the 23 people who were taken too soon. Flowers are still put up on this memorial 25 years later, a true testament to the horrors that occurred on that fateful May afternoon. Now, this downright terrible entry unfolded on the 3rd of October 2024 in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, Africa. That day, the sun was shining, the wind was calm. It seemed like the perfect weather for a ferry across Lake Kivu. Lake Kivu is the 6th largest lake in Africa and lies on the border of the Republic of Congo and Rwanda. Now, this lake is very important because roads alongside the lake are overrun by rebel fighters, meaning that locals and workers are forced to take ferries across the lake to get home or to get to where they're going. These boats, or these ferries, are often poorly maintained and highly overloaded. But sadly, there's often just no other choice. On the 3rd of October, a ferry set sail with approximately 278 passengers, travelling from the town of Minova to Goma, a short trip across Lake Kivu. Now, these towns are connected by a road, but as I said, rebel fighters have overrun them, so locals are forced to use the boat. Now, this ferry that set sail that day was only built for 30 passengers. At the time of its voyage, it was carrying almost 10 times that amount. Now, despite this, however, despite the boat being completely overrun with people, the journey seemed to be smooth until they came to dock. Strong waves suddenly began crashing against the overloaded boat, and people inside noticed water begin to flood in. Now, this is when the horrifying footage was captured. It was captured by friends and family on Goma's shore as the ferry came into dock. On video, you can see that this double-decker vessel is extremely overloaded, and all on video, just a few hundred meters from land, the boat began to tilt. In seconds, it got worse and worse. Some people managed to jump out, but seconds later, the entire ship capsized. Now, most of the passengers in these incidents sadly cannot swim. Lake Kivu is deep, and also none of them were wearing life jackets. If you couldn't swim and had nothing to grab onto, sadly, despite being this close to land, this was a death sentence for most. Passengers that were thrown into the water were hit by the turbulent currents and swept away, but for some passengers, the boat became a deadly death trap as many became trapped inside. Total horror unfolded as rescue teams tried to help those in need, but soon bodies began washing up.
Yeah, it's just horrible.
Friends and families that were waiting at the dock were forced to watch in agony, completely helpless to the situation. They were there to greet loved ones, but instead they were forced to sift through the dead pulled from the lake. Those who were injured were taken to the local hospital, but some people, including children, succumbed to their injuries later that day. The police cordoned off the area to identify the dead. The boat was dragged from the water, but many still remain missing. In total, 78 people lost their lives here, several of which were children. Tragically, this is the third time this year that boats have capsized on Lake Kivu, leading to mass casualties. This caused yet more shock and grief to the local communities. I'm sure most of these people wouldn't have taken that boat if they had the choice. The greedy people who owned and were driving these ferries almost certainly knew that they shouldn't have been doing this. They must have known that passengers had no other option. They knew that they were overloading the boats. Sadly, for 78 people, a short journey across the lake cost them their lives. For Christians all across the world, Easter Sunday is a celebration of Jesus' resurrection. Families gather to share meals and embrace the promise of new beginnings. But for one family in this entry, one particular Easter took a devastating turn, one that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. It begins on a fateful Easter Sunday of April the 16th, 2017, in Cleveland, Ohio. In the Glenville neighborhood in Cleveland lived the Godwin family. Easter was a holiday that the Godwins looked forward to every year. The eldest of the family was 74-year-old Robert Lee Godwin. Robert was a family man. He had 10 children and 14 grandchildren. His favorite hobbies included basketball and fishing, and before he retired, he worked in a foundry. He was described as a good man, a brilliant father and grandfather. He was someone who would do anything to help someone that was in need, the kind of person that they don't make anymore. That fateful Easter Sunday of 2017, Robert walked from his home in Glenville to one of his son's houses to pick up some basketball equipment for another one of his children. After grabbing this equipment, Robert began walking back home along the 600 block of East 93rd Street. As he walked, he held a plastic bag in one hand and picked up aluminium cans and put them in his bag. He did this to help his neighborhood and then turned them all in for a bit of cash. At around 2 p.m, as Robert was walking down the street, minding his own business, picking up cans, a car pulled up and a man got out of it and walked towards Robert. The man approached the elderly man with his phone in his hand, and as he got close, he asked Robert to say Joy Lane, saying that this is the reason that this is about to happen to you.
Hi, can you do me a favor? Can you say Joy Lane?
I remember this.
Robert said Joy Lane, looking quite confused.
It was on YouTube, dude.
And in that second,
for a long time, actually, you could watch it.
And pointed it at Robert. On video, he begged for his life, but the gunman took no notice and pulled the trigger, shooting him point blank in the head. Of course, this gunshot wound was instantaneously fatal. Robert recoiled and fell to the ground. The gunman then hopped back into his car and left him for dead as if he was nothing. Robert lay there on the ground in a pool of his own blood for an hour before his body was discovered by a woman who was driving down the street. Emergency services were rushed to the scene, but declared him dead right there on the pavement. Robert's family were quickly notified by the authorities and were completely distraught to discover what horror had unfolded just around the block from their home. That evening, as they were scrolling on Facebook, they stumbled across a video, and after watching it, they were shocked and totally horrified to discover that it was the murder
of their
beloved grandfather, posted for all to see by a man named Steve Stevens.
The best punishment is not death.
He even said before getting out of the car
you have
that
to
it
make
was
them
unfortunate
suffer
that it was an old guy. It truly breaks
not
my
by
heart.
giving them violence, but just lock them up
For 3
forever.
hours, the gruesome video remained online, showing the slaying of
That's the
innocent
biggest
Robert,
suffering.
until it was manually taken down by Facebook moderators. By then, it had been seen by millions across the world. It had been downloaded and shared thousands of times. 37-year-old Steve Stevens, the person who did this horrific act and then posted it on Facebook, had worked at a behavioral health agency in northeastern Ohio that served children and teenagers. He'd recently filed for bankruptcy and after posting the initial video, he posted a follow-up video admitting what happened. In this second video, he said that he did the murder because he had just snapped, adding that he had a lot of pent-up frustrations. He blamed gambling debts, as well as a recently broken down relationship with his ex, Joy Lane, amongst other things for the murder.
You know what's
he said
the
that he'd killed more
best,
people
biggest,
and that he was
strongest,
hunting for more
most
victims, saying that he wouldn't
respectable
stop
trait is
until the
in
police
a
caught
man
him. He was
to admit
completely
fault.
loony.
Just a couple of man. I'm at the point where I snap. See, the thing is, man, every time I try to talk to y'all, man, y'all always blow me off or just make my seem like it ain't
If I always go through life and saying somebody else's fault or
I shamed myself.
this and that, it's...
I snapped. I just snapped. I just killed 13 man. That's what I did. I killed 13 people. And I'm about to keep killing until...
He killed 13 people, goddamn.
Until they catch me.
The news, as well as the clip, spread like wildfire, quickly reaching international news. All across the world, people were shocked and heartbroken and disgusted to hear what had occurred to an innocent old man.
Yeah, there were people celebrating him, I remember.
Robert's family said that they were distraught, but they had each been brought up and taught to forgive. In this interview, they said that while their dad had been taken, they forgave the killer and pleaded for him to hand himself in.
It's a hole in my heart right now. But one thing I do want to say is I forgive him. Because we all sinners, and we need the shed blood of Jesus Christ to save us. And I'm so grateful for that. So
I could never forgive him.
If you're listening, turn yourself in. You've done enough damage. Just turn yourself in.
That same day, the authorities launched a nationwide manhunt with a $50,000 reward to catch him and bring him to justice.
50K, goddamn, I would have chased the shit out of him, dude.
Ex, who said that they'd recently broken up and that she had decided not to marry him. She said while the breakup had left him devastated, she couldn't have possibly predicted that he'd do anything like this. It was completely out of character. She was devastated that a murder had been committed in her name.
That was my daddy. And then that man killed my daddy for no reason. Nobody knew that my daddy was gonna die yesterday on Easter.
With a killer on the loose, police teams across the country scrambled to find him, conscious that he was unhinged and may strike again. The nation was gripped as days passed, with little information as to where he had fled to. But this all changed Tuesday morning, on April the 18th, when his mobile phone pinged in Erie, Pennsylvania, around 100 miles northeast of Cleveland, where the murder took place. Soon after this, he was noticed in a McDonald's drive-thru in Erie, ordering chicken nuggets and fries. They noticed him and stalled his order, and instead called the police. When his food failed to arrive, Steve realized that something was going on and fled the scene. But by then, the police were already hot on his trail. The police caught up with him and gave chase for a short time before performing a maneuver to take him off the road. Now, this maneuver was successful, but as Steve's car spun out of control, after 48 hours on the run, he pulled out the pistol yet again and turned it on himself. By the time the car had stopped spinning, he was dead. Robert's family wanted to see him go to trial and face justice, to possibly wrap their head around why somebody would do something so horrible to their grandfather. But now, they'll never truly know. Now, the person who took his life away will never truly face justice. A truly terrible outcome for everyone. This was all horrific. Every part of it. Robert was totally innocent. He did absolutely nothing wrong. He was just a sweet old man, walking down the street, picking up cant, helping his community, and he was executed in broad daylight for it. Then, the fact that Steve posted it on Facebook is bloody revolting. He murdered Robert as if he wasn't almost 75 years old and wasn't loved by everyone he knew, like he wasn't even a person at all. Hundreds gathered at the spot where he was murdered. Here, they paid their respects to an innocent man, tears were shed, and flowers were placed. So, if you're going to take anything away from this entry, if you take anything away from this channel, in fact, it's to remember that life is too short and that life is too fragile. Always remember to hold your loved ones close. Frequently tell them that you love them, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Don't take anyone or anything for granted, because everything in life can be snatched away in an instant. But that is the end of the video. May each and every victim featured rest in peace. Wowzers trousers. This one was shockingly sad. All of it. It's not often I start tearing up while trying to voice the video. That last story really made me think of my dearly departed grandparents, and I can't imagine losing them in the way Robert's family lost him. But starting from the top, we've got the parasailing tragedy in Florida. This has to be the 4th or 5th time that I've covered a case where it was directly caused by someone ignoring safety and instead focusing on profit. Honestly, I never thought what would actually happen if the tow rope was cut. Being dragged across the water helplessly to your death with your kids attached to your back is a pure nightmare, one that I didn't even think about. And I hope Daniel, the person who took them out, is sued to hell and back, and is held criminally responsible. Next, we've got the gent who kamikazed his plane into his former workplace. While this was a re-upload that I accidentally cut out of a video, regardless, it was no less shocking than when I first saw it. The fact that nobody else was injured is a true miracle, but I don't think it really needed to get to this stage, and it's tragic that nothing could have been done to avoid this before it occurred. Then we've got the fireworks explosion in the Netherlands. Again, it's one of those entries where it was mainly caused by greed. The company was lowering the size of the fireworks on the shipping documents, meaning that they were cheaper to import. More profit. Because of this, nobody truly knew how large or how many fireworks were inside, not to mention storing them in illegal storage crates outside was just asking for an accident to occur. Of course, we can't forget the Congo ferry capsize. This was also a re-upload that I...
Hold on.
I wanted to include because it's an all too often occurrence in Africa, one that is not widely broadcast to the world. So these things just keep occurring and nothing is learned. This was the 3rd time in 2024 that a boat had collapsed on this lake, causing mass casualties. And the worst part about all of it is that most of them had no choice but to put their lives at risk, and it cost them all dearly. I hope the captains are all held responsible. And finally, the Joy Lane murder. My God, I hate all aspects of this entry. Robert was so innocent, walking down a street in his own neighborhood, picking up cans, and he was murdered for no reason, just because a guy felt frustrated. This is all bad enough, but then to record it and post it on Facebook and drag the whole family through the pain of seeing a family member gunned down in broad daylight is just abhorrent. I just wish he'd been man enough to face a trial, because now they have no closure. This whole video was tragic, as they always are. But most importantly, what did you think of this one? As always, I do try and read every comment, so do let me know what you thought. If you're this far...
Imagine you're a kid in Europe, playing around, kicking a ball against the house, killing time, when all of a sudden this car rounds the corner and starts heading straight towards you with this thing on top of it. This thing that you've never seen before. Is it a bomb? Is it a gun? Is it one of those spider-looking things from the Matrix? You don't know. And you're not going to stick around to find out. So you run and you hide behind the first thing that you come across. And that's how we wind up with this photo. At least that's one theory. Fact of the matter is, we don't know what caused this kid to hide behind a trash can.
Hiding from the
Maybe
Google.
he was scared, maybe he'd run away and was afraid of getting caught. Maybe he was in the middle of doing something he wasn't supposed to do, but it's intriguing, isn't it? This image was screenshotted from Google Street View as part of a series called 9 Eyes by artist John Raffman. The point of the series was to document the strange and esoteric and mundane moments of humanity captured by Google Street View cameras. It's like, you know, we've seen a million photographs over the years, but what sets these apart is a total and complete lack of bias from a photographer. There was no agenda behind any of these photographs, no planning, no artistic eye. These moments just exist. And by a stroke of luck, they were captured for us to witness. All these moments are devoid of any context, which leaves a lot of room for wonder and curiosity to slip in. Like, what was happening here? Was it staged? Was someone hurt? Is this a serious moment or a humorous moment? It's sometimes hard to tell. Each photo is a little mystery, with some, like the hiding boy, a little bit more mysterious than others. But along with creating mysteries, this mass collection of images has also created a lot of evidence. Evidence that solved a lot of mysteries. From stolen goods to missing people to full-on mass atrocities. Today we're going to talk about some of the most interesting mysteries that have been solved with Google Street View. Google launched Google Maps in 2005, but the idea to use photography to map the world came much, much earlier. In fact, it goes all the way back to 1867. This is when French cartographer Aimé Lucidot pioneered a technique called photogrammetry, which Wikipedia defines as the science of collecting information about physical objects and environments using photography. Basically, cartographers and map makers suddenly had this new technology of photography to play with, and they figured out how to take these photographs and create maps and surveys out of them. One type of photogrammetry, called stereophotogrammetry, creates 3D measurements from two or more, overlapping images. So a line of sight is found from measuring the distance from the same object in each picture, and then they direct that from the camera location, and then the lines can be mathematically intersected, called triangulation, to find the 3D coordinates of a targeted point. These same techniques can be applied across the entire electromagnetic spectrum to create 3D images from X-rays. This is basically how CT scans work. And then with the invention of flight, map makers and cartographers took their cameras to the skies to create more detailed maps than ever before, and eventually this technology made its way to space. By the 1980s, pretty much the entire world had been photographed at precise detail. So by the early 2000s, Google had become the top internet search engine, take that, Ask Jeeves, and was swimming in cash, so in October 2004, they acquired a C++ mapping program designed by Danish brothers Lars and Jens Rasmussen. With the addition of satellite mapping, geospatial data, and traffic conditions, this became Google Maps. It was launched in February 2005, and at first it was a desktop application, basically just helping users navigate a path from point A to point B, and it looked like this. This was just after the internet, before smartphones, when you had to print out directions before you went anywhere, and at the time it was just mind-blowing technology. It was a glorious time, my friend. Glorious time.
Google Maps is the best! True that! Double true!
And right after that, Google acquired the satellite image firm Keyhole, which would later be reborn as Google Earth. Quick side note, Keyhole was launched in 2001, and it was originally used for urban planning and real estate. They sold on a subscription model, but they were actually kind of struggling financially until the Iraq War in 2003. All of a sudden, news services like CNN were using Keyhole to create 3D maps of places like Bagram for their news reports. And this got the attention of the CIA, who invested in Keyhole through their venture capital firm InQtel. The CIA has a venture capital firm? Let me see. NQTEL invests in tech startups that align with their interests, such as social media monitoring, phone speech analytics software, holography, and 3D facial imaging. And in this case, Keyhole provided them with geospatial intelligence, and then Google bought them. Just another one of the many wonderful things that came from the Iraq War. Also around 2005, Google employees began testing cameras in vans, just kind of taking pictures around the streets of San Francisco, and then they would stitch them together. Some of the first images look like this. No, wait. San Francisco in 2005. That's more like it. Shortly after that, in May of 2007, Street View was announced as a new feature of Google Maps that lets users kind of view and navigate 360-degree level imagery of the various cities in the U.S. Initially, Street View only collected images from about 5 cities in the U.S., and then it kind of spread all over the world from there. Since then, Street View has mobilized a fleet of cameras attached to everything from cars to mopeds to bipeds. Trekker, essentially a backpack with a camera on top, allows anyone to walk around and collect images from places that are only available by foot, like Machu Picchu. They even recruited astronauts to give users a Street View look inside the International Space Station, which they call Space View. So if it seems like Google has eyes everywhere, it kind of does. They've seen some pretty weird shit, and some of that shit solves some actual mysteries, and we're going to be talking about those today. So let's get into it, and let's start with some fun ones. It'll get more serious as we go along. First mystery to talk about is one that's plagued thousands, if not millions, in the literary world for decades. They found Waldo. Turns out he was at 77 Putney High Street in London. And yeah, I know it's a bit blurry, but come on. We got him. Can't hide from Google, Waldo. Or where do you go to find one standard-sized 2 pewter cauldron and an owl for their first year at Hogwarts? That's right, Diagon Alley. It's viewable on Street View from the Warner Brothers lot in London. If Harry Potter's not your thing, how about pigeons? Are you a pigeon person? Because there's a whole flock of pigeon people in Musashino, Japan. Yeah, I've got questions. These people just carry pigeon masks with them everywhere they go, like, just in case? Would this be considered furries? Or featheries? Do human-sized pigeons eat human-sized trash? What cars are these guys pooping on? Actually, there is an answer to this. The Street View website will tell you like what districts the car is going to be coming to in the next month, but nothing as specific as what road or what street. So my guess is that they saw it and then online, and then they just kind of staked it out. Or it looks like this was a trekker thing and not a car because it's on the sidewalk and not on the street. So maybe the guy carrying the camera like told his friends where to be at the right time. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but I think this could be an inside job. And then there's this guy. Now, some people have claimed this is the Loch Ness Monster in San Diego, which is crazy. I mean, the reason it's called the Loch Ness Monster is because it's in Loch Ness in Scotland. It can't be in San Diego. Come on, people. Now, this looks more like a certain sea monster that I watched in a show when I was a kid. Huh? No, nobody else remembers Segment in the Sea Monster? Guys, I'm like 1,000 years old. This next one was found by a Twitch streamer when he was playing GeoGuessr, which if you haven't played it, it's a game that basically like drops you at a random point on Street View.
There's this guy,
and you
he
have to kind of figure
0.1
out
milliseconds of looking at the GeoGuessr, he knows where you're at. That's so
fact,
crazy.
I started playing it with my Patreon supporters and Patreon live streams recently. Patreon. But no, the guy was streaming this game, GeoGuessr, when this happened.
Pero no atropelló a nadie, ¿verdad?
The pictures aren't on Street View any longer, but of course, you know, the internet got a hold of them, so they're floating around out there. So what we do know about this is that it happened in Senegal. What we don't know is what happened to the motorcyclist. Like, it looks like he's attempting a U-turn and got hit by the car, but it's not exactly in a spot that would warrant a U-turn, and it's also in the middle of nowhere with no other cars in sight, so it's not like he didn't have all the time in the world to cross safely. It's almost like he wanted to get hit by a multi-billion-dollar company for some reason. And maybe the most violent image caught by Street View went down in Edinburgh. What you see is car mechanic Gary Kerr just moments after striking his employer Dan Thompson outside of their garage with an axe. Something that would never happen in my place of work. So apparently these photos were discovered over a year later when someone was like searching for an auto mechanic on Street View. So they called the police, who went to Dan Thompson's house, and what they found shocked them to their core. Dan Thompson. They found Dan Thompson. He was alive. He was alive and well. The whole thing was a prank. Yeah, they saw the car coming down the street and decided to have a little fun, which makes this the second greatest prank by Scots ever caught on camera. So yeah, we've been having some fun here. Every one of these so far has been a prank or a joke of some kind. But the next ones, these are not pranks. So way back in 2010, a family in the UK had their family RV stolen. And then sometime after that, their 11-year-old son was kind of clicking through Street View with his friends, just playing around, when he noticed a man standing next to a parked car in their driveway, right next to the RV. So the boy showed this to his parents, they looked at it, and they figured out that this was actually like right around the time that the RV was stolen. So they contacted the police, and the police reached out to Google. And they were eventually able to unblur the license plate of the guy's car. The guy was caught, the RV was returned, and the guy was arrested. So pro tip, if you're in the middle of stealing something and a Google car rides by, maybe steal some other time. In fairness, this was in the very early days of Street View, so he may not have known what he was looking at. Speaking of thieving, a guy in Oxford was arrested for stealing and hoarding over 500 bikes in his backyard, and it created a pile big enough to be seen by Google Earth. The neighbors actually complained of the fact that they were having a rat infestation that was caused by this mountain of bikes. They were making a home in the mountain of bikes. HOAs, am I right? When he was caught, the guy swore up and down that he was going to donate the bicycles to Africa. Just Africa, general, I guess. But, I mean, you know, who hasn't let a Goodwill pile get a little too big? Until it can, like, you know, be seen from space. Something a bit more dramatic. A young man in the Netherlands was mugged while riding his bike, and the mugger stole his phone and €165. But I guess he kind of remembered seeing a Street View car just before that happened, so he went online and checked it out. And sure enough, he saw this image that showed his attackers approaching him. So he went to the police, they were able to get the images de-blurred, and yeah, they caught him. No, apparently the police knew their faces right away because they had a history of criminal activity. One of the officers later told a newspaper, quote,
"Stop breaking the law, asshole!"
In all seriousness, getting pulled off a bike and beaten up would be terrifying, and it's a good thing that that kid got some justice. In more seriousness, there's a story of a woman in Oklahoma City in 2014. The woman, whose name has remained anonymous, came home one day to find that her house was being ransacked by two men. This caught them off guard, and they pulled a gun on her and held her at gunpoint while they finished the job. She told the local TV station, quote, "And then they pulled a gun and held me for over an hour. There were times that I thought they would shoot me before they left. I was very lucky they didn't hurt me. I was very lucky that day." Several months after that, a neighbor found an image on Street View of two men walking down their street, and it matched their description that she gave them, even the clothes that they were wearing, and sure enough, when they looked, it was taken on the same day. The police did release the image to the local media, but unfortunately, the assailants had never been identified. And kind of maybe a wholesome twist, she seemed to kind of take pity on them. In the article that I read, she kind of just described them as a couple of kids that got in over their heads, and then apparently one of them seemed to show some remorse about the situation, but yeah, still, they've never been caught, so maybe this is kind of like a half-solved mystery. So this next story gets a lot more serious, and it's a pretty famous one. It's been covered in a lot of videos, but I can't not talk about it in a video about Google Street View stuff. It dates back to 1997 near West Palm Beach, Florida, when a guy named William Molt went missing one night after leaving a club. He called his girlfriend around 11 p.m. to say he was leaving to come home, but he never made it. No trace of him or his personal belongings or his car were ever found. Like, to his girlfriend and his family, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Like, it was a real missing persons case. This went unsolved for like 22 years. Finally, in August of 2019, a resident of a neighborhood known as Moon Bay Circle was kind of looking at the Google Maps when he noticed an unusual shape under the water in the community pond. He contacted a friend that had a drone to fly over it and get a closer look, and what they found was a sunken car. The police fished the car out of the water, and sure enough, it was William's car with his remains trapped inside. The body was obviously like completely decomposed at that point, but no evidence of foul play was ever found, so the leading theory is that he just lost control of his car and wound up in the pond. Just deep enough to not be seen for 22 years. Would it be in bad taste to make a reference to The Office here? This is too serious of a story, let's not do that. He may have been drunk and wound up going to that lake, or maybe his car malfunctioned in some way, we really don't know. But while we may not know exactly what happened to him, at least his girlfriend and his family do have some kind of closure now. But maybe the saddest of these stories is the case of Paulette Landru from Belgium. Paulette was an 83-year-old grandmother suffering from Alzheimer's who had developed a tendency of kind of wandering off from time to time. Sometimes she would knock on neighbors' door. She was at that stage where the family had been talking about putting her in a memory care facility, but she wasn't quite that bad yet. Well, on November 2nd of 2020, she wandered off. and was never seen again. The police and neighbors searched the whole area, but no trace of her was ever found. Until 2 years later, somebody involved in the case looked up the house on Street View, and there she was. By some stroke of incredible luck, the Street View car just happened to drive by at the moment that she wandered off, and in a series of photos, it clearly captured her crossing the street from her house into a neighbor's garden. The police followed up on this, and sadly, her remains were found at the bottom of a hill, which is just visible in the photos. So yeah, from the looks of things, she just simply lost her footing and fell down the hill. Which, I don't know how they missed that in their original search. It feels like a pretty obvious place to look, but what do I know? This case has become kind of famous online, and I think it's just because it's so eerie. Like you're seeing a woman in her final moments, but it all just looks mundane. What's especially sad is that when you look in the other direction in these photos, you can see her husband working in the garden, just completely unaware that his wife was walking to her death right behind him. And he didn't know that whole time. I don't know, it's just really sad. Street View was also used to help solve a murder in Columbia, South Carolina. Leslie Todd Parvin Jr. murdered Edgar Lopez and Pablo Gutierrez Guzman after getting into an argument with them. Afterwards, he fled to Texas, which, yeah, that's what people do. But not before a witness memorized the license plate of his minivan on the night of the murder. That minivan with that license plate was later found on Street View at his parents' house in Texas. So yeah, they were able to arrest him. He's been sentenced to 35 years in prison. Okay, this next one is freaking crazy. What if you found out that the produce guy at your local grocer that you've been buying peaches from for years was actually a Sicilian mob boss? Because that actually happened. Yes, Street View helped locate mafia boss Giacchino Gamino, who's been a fugitive for 20 years. Gamino was first sentenced for mafia-related crimes in 1984 and was later released. And then, the judge who sentenced him just happened to die in a car bomb in 1992. He was later imprisoned in Barcelona in 1998, serving a life sentence, and he escaped. So apparently there was a film shoot at the prison, and he used all that commotion to just kind of sneak out. As somebody who's worked on many film shoots, yeah, I could see it. I could totally see that. And then he just kind of vanished for decades, with the European authorities at a complete loss as to what happened to him. And then he just showed up on Google Street View. Turns out he'd been living outside Madrid working as a grocer named Manuel. Again, for decades. But after seeing him on Street View, they apprehended him at the grocery store, and yeah, apparently he was so confused by the whole thing, he said this: "How did you find me? I haven't called my family in 10 years. Well, that's what you get, Giacchino. Your mother's been worried sick." This one's super creepy. So in 2022, a serial killer was arrested named Rex Heuermann. He was found guilty of murdering 4 women and burying them in burlap sacks in his house. But a year or so later, an image turned up on Google Street View of him talking to an unidentified woman on East 36th Street in Manhattan. He's even carrying the same bag that was on him when the police arrested him, literally just a couple of weeks after this image was taken. Now, this is probably just a casual encounter. The police don't think that this woman was one of his victims, but for all we know, that might have been his intention when he was talking to her. Or maybe he was just asking for directions. But either way, it's creepy, because, like, you never know who you're talking to on the street. And last but by no means least, Google Earth helped solve an actual mass killing in Cameroon in 2015. It started with a video that went viral in 2018 of 7 soldiers escorting a small group of women and children along a dirt path in Africa before blindfolding them and shooting them 22 times. The video claimed the soldiers were from the Cameroon army, but the government denied those claims. Issa Chiroma, their Minister of Communications at the time, said that the video is clearly a manipulation to wrongly blame the army for killing civilians. Should be noted that at that same time, there were 7 members of the Cameroon military that were under investigation from the government. But the BBC decided to investigate to find out the truth, and using Google Earth, they were able to confirm that there was a distinctive mountain range seen in the video that matched one in northern Cameroon, specifically near a village called Kraramapa. They also studied the shadows of the figures in the video, kind of like a sundial, to determine the position of the sun. So this, plus a certain building in the video, helped them to determine that the killings took place between March 20th and April 5th, 2015. Other details from the video also pointed to the Cameroon military, including their uniforms and the guns they carried, which were Serbian-made Zastava N21s, which were also used by some of the Cameroon military at the time.
I like this.
They were even able to match the 7 names on the list of people who were being investigated at the time with Facebook profiles, and then identifying statements from villagers and soldiers nearby. So yeah, thanks to the BBC, Google Earth, and a little bit of photogrammetry, the world's been able to hold the Cameroon military accountable for the deaths of these women and children. And according to the new communications minister, the soldiers are all in prison now. Hopefully this one's more honest than the last one. So all of this internet sleuthing is really cool. But some of you may have felt a little uneasy about some of the things in these stories. Things like Google working with the authorities to unblur faces and license plates, the idea of constant surveillance over every inch of the planet, people getting recorded for just being outside in public, things like that. If so, you're not alone. In fact, for all the investigations that Google has helped solve, far more have been opened up against them over the years over issues of privacy. There were essentially two main areas of concern when Google first launched this back in 2007. One was the collecting and publishing of images that might endanger privacy. So like maybe images of somebody getting arrested, somebody walking out of an adult bookstore or entering an abortion clinic. Though the face blurring thing that they started doing, that settled most of those issues. Also needs to be said that some countries like South Korea don't really like the idea of their highly populated areas being so easily viewable due to security issues, because, you know. A second area of concern seems a little bit more serious, and I didn't know anything about this before I researched this video, but it turns out those Google Street View cars were also collecting Wi-Fi data over open networks. So at first Google denied this was happening, and then it became, okay, it's happening, but just a little bit. And then, it turns out after an investigation, they were actually collecting vast amounts of payload with routers hidden inside the roaming cars. I'm talking stuff like email addresses, passwords, search histories, network information. So yeah, not great. This was all kind of early days stuff. Most of the objections to Google Street View has started to peter out like around 2012. Partly because people began to warm up to its usefulness and decided maybe the pros outweigh the cons, partly just due to the futility of fighting a corporate giant like Google, and partly because I think, we've all just kind of decided that's just how things are now. There is also the fact that at this point Google is pretty much fully in bed with the US federal government. Like when Google acquired Keyhole in 2004, it also gained its clients, which included the CIA. In fact, Google has an entire department. It used to be called Google Federal. Now it's called Google Public Sector, which manages multiple contracts with the US government, and it makes millions of dollars doing it. Which might be why, in 2010, when the Electronic Privacy Information Center filed a complaint with the FTC over the whole, downloading private Wi-Fi data with their cars thing, the FTC decided not to take up the complaint, even though it is a violation of the US Wiretap Act and the Federal Communications Act. But that's just kind of where we are now. The loss of privacy has just been kind of normalized. It all just kind of, depends on what's important to you, like the individual privacy or the convenience that it offers. And to be fair, the safety it provides.
It's all about the greater good.
The greater good.
I mean, when was the last time you got lost somewhere in a dangerous place? Seriously, tell me in the comments. Kind of makes me wonder what I May Lucid Out would think of our world today, where the photogrammetry he pioneered has led to this thing that's become so integrated into our lives and made getting around so much easier. Because maps basically are a kind of data visualization. It's how we see the data of the world. It's how we make sense of the world. And if you want to make more sense of your world, you might want to check out the data visualization class on brilliant.org. Through 11 lessons, you'll learn about combined variables, continuous variables, comparables, distributions, and transformed data. And if none of that means anything to you, trust me, it will after you take this course, and it could possibly change your life. Because we are awash with data, but that data doesn't mean anything to you unless you understand it. And the best way to understand it is to visualize it. Like, we're visual creatures. We don't make sense of things by looking at a pile of data on a spreadsheet. I mean, I guess some of you do, weirdos. By the way, if all those words sound way over your head, that's the thing. That's the beauty of Brilliant. They make learning more like playing a game. You're just solving puzzles and using your innate problem-solving abilities to learn things, and you learn them in a way that makes sense to you, things that you can build off of in other ways of your life. And you can apply it to the many, many courses that they have on Brilliant, like the mathematics courses, which go all the way from the fundamentals all the way up to competition-level calculus, or you can get your science on with quantum mechanics and special relativity, and they've added tons of computer and science courses, including courses on LLMs, so, you can be ahead of everybody else on all this AI stuff that we're seeing everywhere. And you can try it totally for free for 30 days when you sign up at brilliant.org/answerswithjoe, and if you stick around after that, you'll get 20% off your annual subscription. Seriously, if you set aside 15 minutes every day and do a few lessons on Brilliant, by the end of the year, you will be shocked at what you now know. You'll need a new hat, because your brain got so big. So keep your local haberdasher in business by clicking the link below or use the QR code right here on the screen to get 30 days for free and then get 20% off after that. Brilliant.org is awesome. If you haven't checked it out, it's time to do it. Links down below. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. If this is your first time here and you liked it, maybe give it a thumbs up. If this is your 800th time here and you liked it, give me a thumbs up. But if it's your first time here, we'll take a look at some other mystery content right here, because I've done plenty of them. Or, you know, you could take a look at some of the other videos that might be on your sidebar if you're on your monitor or whatever. Any of them with my face on them, give them a look. If you enjoy them, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. Big thanks to the community on Patreon and the channel members who are just being awesome and supporting me. You can get access to all that by hitting the join button down below or going to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. You get access to a private Discord server and all kinds of cool things like live streams, Zoom chats. It's just a cool thing to do, and it helps support the channel, and it means a lot, so thank you. And as always, you can watch this video ad-free and early over on Nebula, and also, we have to kind of censor things for
but they give little information, except to not be worried. But the resounding noise of power tools and strong vacuums echoing through the night give you little reassurance. Plus, they keep carting off barrel after barrel branded with radiation labels on them. You and the other neighbors wonder, what did that kid get up to in his backyard? David Hahn's life, though tragic, was an extremely fascinating one, filled with secrecy, life-threatening danger, and an obsessive quest for knowledge that culminated in his unfortunate end. Although his potential for greatness went unrealized due to a reckless abandon that cut his life short, his genius allowed him to accomplish things that no one even dreamed possible. Ever heard of the term, "Don't try this at home"?
Hey bro, where's your Bunsen burners and test tubes and stuff?
In the hallway closet.
Thank you.
There's a reason why information can be dangerous. In the wrong hands, it can be life-threatening. Some are adamantly against the idea of censorship, but most can agree that teaching a teenager how to make a chemical weapon used in World War II is not a good idea, especially if you leave them with this information unsupervised. Surprisingly, that's where our story begins, when David Hahn was handed a book that was absolutely not appropriate for children. It sent him down a path that not only put him in danger, but also his entire neighborhood.
I'm okay.
What are you doing?
Just a little experiment.
Oh, as an example for the video?
What? Oh, I didn't realize you were doing one. Nah, I'm just trying to replicate my precious Yeet energy drink formula. Some guy on the internet says he discovered it.
Nothing that starts with some guy on the internet ever ends well.
You are some guy on the internet.
Yes, but I'm warning people against doing experiments in their homes. This story is a perfect cautionary tale. Grill, please don't destroy the kitchen.
I won't destroy it any more than it already is. But just in case, where's the fire extinguisher?
David Hahn was born on October 30th, 1976 in Royal Oak, Michigan. He was always a curious child. In one of his earliest experiments, at just 4 years old, he combined creams and liquids from the bathroom in a small bowl, including drain cleaner, in hopes of getting a magical reaction. He did. It bubbled violently and almost boiled over. Worried, he flushed it down the toilet so his parents wouldn't find out. This, as you'll learn, would be a dangerous pattern for David. He got away with many of these experiments because his parents often left him unsupervised. His father, Ken, worked long hours as a mechanical engineer. His mother, Patty, while very loving and present, had a drinking problem and was medicated for depression and paranoid schizophrenia. Eventually, David's parents divorced in 1985, when he was 9. Ken remarried to a woman named Kathy and got custody of David, while he would stay with his mother and her boyfriend on weekends and holidays, about an hour drive from his father's place. With these new arrangements, according to David, the caring went away. David's adventures ramped up when his stepmother's father gifted him the Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments at around the age of 10. It was a colorful children's chemistry book from the 1960s with drawings and exciting experiments.
It's 4 p.m. and I have
how to make
over 100 grams of protein in this, so
toxic or corrosive substances.
Man,
it's a good day.
So hardcore.
We did a bunch of work.
It definitely makes lawn darts look tame. By this point,
uploaded
David
a design,
had built things
told
such as
some
electronics
stuff,
and small homemade
some customer service,
that he blew up at the bottom of his empty pool. So
upgraded the layout, upgraded the socials.
Only gave the hyperactive kid the
There's so much more to do, but I am tired already,
like
dude.
A chain reaction that nobody saw coming. David was gaining a reputation as a strange kid. Anytime he would converse
I have to hop on the treadmill for 2 hours today still, but
divert the subject to the dozen experiments he was conducting simultaneously, many of them from the Golden Book. One time he made chloroform, and as per the book, in red lettering, it said, "Sniff carefully."
Then I'm gonna make some chicken later as well.
Peculiar Swedish odor. So David leaned over and took a big sniff. He
Chicken.
immediately blacked out and fell to the floor.
masala.
He woke up about an hour later, dazed and confused, before realizing what had happened. He kept that incident from his parents.
So what we can do is design some
and his
emotes.
experiments grew more dangerous. It was obvious from the labs at his 2 respective homes that safety wasn't a priority for David.
Yeah, I might
His
sub
bedroom at his
Nightbot as well.
father's and the potting shed at his mother's were
Oh, I
covered
haven't
in
bought
pockmarks and stains
Windows
from
XP
chemical
yet.
reactions gone wrong. It was also obvious from his appearance as well, because
Hmm.
supposedly, one time a chemical mishap left his face beet red and his hair bright orange. But David also claimed it was from an overdose of steroids he ordered for a self-tanning experiment. He produced hair dye at home, and one time after experimenting over the weekend, was unable to clean it off. He went to school on Monday with multicolored hair of green, brown, and black. He was teased for it, and girls fired spitballs at him during English class. What was most strange of all
Girls
was
fired
that while he
spitballs
showed
at
an
him.
exceptional passion for chemistry, he struggled in school. He was often distracted, got a lot of C's and D's, and had a lot of difficulty spelling words. He didn't do well at sports either. Unless it was about his obsession with science and making things go boom, he often showed little care. But expectedly, he excelled in his science classes. He had a bit of an ego too, and was known for interjecting in class when it was a subject he knew well.
Right here, and the word on the street is that there's going to be an attempt towards 110,000.
Yes.
What's going to be the justification for that? Well, futures markets will always be the reason why Bitcoin moves up and down. It's the future expectations that investors have when it comes to the idea of,
Yeah,
oh,
they got
where
a
could
bunch of
Bitcoin
liquidation
go? Or
above,
where would I
but
like to see Bitcoin end up at? Now, we've got some big options
down as
expiry
well.
coming
It's
into
crazy
play,
times right
around
now.
14 billion in the Bitcoin options. And you can see on this chart right here that Bitcoin has been eating the long liquidations. And as we go into it, we do have quite a significant amount of short liquidations, which sit
Yeah,
around,
we haven't eaten any longs
yeah,
yet,
around the
actually.
102,000 zone. Now, what you've got to be mindful of, guys, is when they attack liquidations, what you've got to understand is this is money being returned back into the market because retail traders are borrowing leverage. They borrow money to trade.
Everybody put
And,
out
yeah, I use
for Christmas
leverage, and I use quite a
presents.
bit of leverage. But the way I understand leverage is I use their money, not mine, which is why I don't require that much margin to open trades. So what we did yesterday in our trading from, it was during the Platinum live stream, the live stream we did yesterday. I was talking to the guys about going long on Bitcoin, okay? And it was just to demonstrate an example. And I opened a trade. It was only a small size. I opened the trade, and then I said, now, you know what? I can't be bothered to just play this. It's getting very boring, and I didn't like the price action. The second the live stream ended, I noticed something about Bitcoin, and it started to burp. And when I say burp, I mean by orders were coming into Bitcoin, and they just wouldn't stop. And that was just from exo charts and just paying attention to what was going on the
That's
liquidity.
open interest
We
yesterday.
managed to exploit 2 trades, all right? First one was Bitcoin, which was a very small move, $785 on that play right there. And then, of course, going into it, I play mainly Ethereum, okay? So Ethereum, the reason why I trade Ethereum more than when I trade Bitcoin, I use Bitcoin as a hedge, okay? This is how I trade it. So Ethereum, in principle, was basing out at the lows, okay? And it was holding significantly, but Bitcoin was dropping, okay? When Bitcoin was dropping, I had opened a trade and it was going against me.
Eve also
so then I
followed
waited
though.
to see when Bitcoin's price was going to stop dropping. And then as I looked over to Ethereum, I saw Ethereum had created a few wicks. So they were sweeping liquidity and then they were bringing price back up. I was looking to the hybrid system to see if any vector candle recovery points were coming into play. And that's exactly what I was trading towards. So I took the long on Ethereum whilst my Bitcoin long was in a drawdown. Okay, so I was in a drawdown of around about $1,500. I took the trade on Ethereum and then Ethereum just shot up. It made the nice flavorsome move to the upside, cleared out $3,127, and then we managed to effectively make a little bit on Bitcoin, which in my opinion was a break-even
So
trade,
good. I should have
But
taken the
that's what
prop
I do.
yesterday.
I sometimes enter on
And call it
Ethereum
a day.
first, or I enter
I
on
was too greedy.
Bitcoin first. It all depends. When I say hedge, it just means I'm trading in the same direction. I just take a different entry point. So to put it into perspective, it's like this. Imagine you go long on Bitcoin, okay? And you are here, all right? So I'll put it to perspective for you all just to give you a good example of it. So this was the move that we exploited last night.
Yeah.
That move right there, okay? But I left some on the
Edit that
table,
back.
so I didn't hold the Bitcoin trade long enough as such, right? So Ethereum was already in this consolidation in this area right here to holding price, and it was showing a promise of marking higher. So I took my entry
It got
inside
all
of
the
this
way
range
back
here
down.
with Ethereum, okay? Now Ethereum started to move up. Then Bitcoin started to move up. So I was like, okay, my entry on Bitcoin was already inside of this range right here, okay? So I was already in a drawdown on Bitcoin, but Ethereum started to move up, right? So I switched it and said, I'll go long on Ethereum whilst I'm trying to recover from this trade on Bitcoin. Ethereum shoots up, happy days, covers my cost, and then Bitcoin followed suit, but I didn't trust Bitcoin because it has the tendency to just snap back. So then I ended up leaving money on the table, only took $700, but that's how I use Bitcoin and Ethereum. Go over to Ethereum and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. It was this play right here. This area here on Ethereum was consolidating, all right? And that's where I was like, it was inside of this area. No, it was yesterday. Yeah, it was this area here. What day are we on? 26? No. When was it? Bloody hell. I've got my days.
No, it's his move, yeah.
Well, anyway. No, it was this area here. Yeah, it was going to this area. No, it was this area. Yeah, it was this area.
It looks so scuffed because if it's scuffed.
Never mind. We made some money. But the idea
Just look at the recovery
is
candle.
to put it into perspective. You've got an asset going down and it's consolidating, okay? And it looks like it wants to hold the range. If the other asset is doing this, okay, and it's not really consolidating and you're caught in a drawdown, you look to the asset that it's consolidating, okay? So where I took my entry point here on Ethereum, okay, Ethereum starts to make the move up, Bitcoin starts to follow suit, okay? Get it to a point where it's making me money, close off the Bitcoin trade, you've managed to capture yourself a trade on Ethereum. So it's just taking different entries and it's like scaling in, but you're not averaging down on the same asset. You're already in a profit in the one and you're just anticipating that the rally in one asset is going to follow in on the other, because that's what usually sometimes happens. Ethereum will start moving, Bitcoin holds. If you look at yesterday's live stream, okay, the pump from yesterday, notice when I was saying that Ethereum had imbalances above and I closed off my Ethereum trade really prematurely, but I didn't care. And a Bitcoin trade closed it up prematurely, didn't care. But I never knew it was going to do that. But we had the assumption that as long as price was going to hold one certain point, there's a good chance it was going to go up towards the next point. And that's what Ethereum ended up doing. Bitcoin moved, Ethereum retraced, and then continued even higher. So that's something you want to try and use in your trading, guys. Look to one asset and see how it's performing and then focus on the other asset to see if it's justified. What could they be doing? Could they be loading up on Ethereum in preparation for a rally to the upside whilst Bitcoin's moving up? Pay attention to that logic, okay? Yeah. Any questions on that? Merry Christmas, my guy. Merry Christmas. Happy days, happy days. Some of you don't like Sailor. Sailor said he's protecting Bitcoin with his shares. Wait, we ain't supposed to be building our business based on Bitcoin. Bitcoin issued by BTC, is insured by Bitcoin. Since Bitcoin is, why would we need to support it? Look, man, everyone's going to have their opinion on BTC, man. I mean, look at this right here, okay? You've got this story here, okay, is very interesting. Given that Bloomberg's the one that's causing or slating Bitcoin, not Bitcoin, Tether, all right? Now, it says here, to summarize it, Bloomberg claims Trump's crypto-friendly administration could make Tether's risky practice a bigger threat to the financial system. How is it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. But this seems like Bloomberg were paid to do that. They were paid to push that narrative. Even in this article here, it says here, Bloomberg is back to doing what it does best, pushing fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This time, the target is Tether and the crypto industry's biggest stablecoin issuer, and the ammunition is Donald Trump's presidency. So they're already trying to attack this guy. It says here, Howard Lutnick's Trump's Commerce Secretary pick has ties to Tether through Cantor Fitzgerald, which owns a 5% stake and profits from its operations. Now, Tether has been making quite a significant amount of profit, but ultimately, I mean, even with this banning that Mika have put in play, the European zone, on a e-license that is required by Tether, okay? So Tether needs to have an e-license to be authorized to offer Tether or allow Tether to be used in the European zone. Well, why isn't the same being put out in the US? Well, because this guy right here, he needs it. He's got a crypto company. Of course he needs Tether, but then of course that opens the doors to USDC and Circle. I would say that once Circle, the company, the stablecoin issuer, gets onto the IPO, then that's going to make things very interesting for US Tether. Okay, I believe it's going to make it interesting. It will be one of the biggest competitors against US Tether. It's second in line anyway. But if Circle ends up becoming on the IPO and listed on the stock market, that will be challenging Coinbase at the same time. But then you'll have yourself two heavyweights in the marketplace playing the game. Okay, so that's really what's going on with this Tether thing. It might be all hearsay, but never mind. Now, it says here, Bitcoin. What liquidation zones reveal about Bitcoin's future? So it says here, right, that we've got Bitcoin teasing at 100K once again. Crowd already looking ahead to 110K as Christmas comes to a close. All right. So this chart here uses dominance or people's perspective on where they expect price to be. Quite frankly, it's not that you can't use it, but it's a sentiment indication, all right? And historically, when you see prices rising, people have an expectation of it going up even more. And that's what this chart is effectively looking for. Again, saying here, now, traders speculating for 110K once again. Can you marry it up to the idea of liquidations? Well, you've still got a few long liquidations down here, and we don't really have that many short liquidations, but you can see this green bar here is effectively telling you that there are long liquidations about to be taken. Where would that put Bitcoin? Well, down below at 92,000, you do have the majority of the liquidation points that could be taken. Going into the order flow of Bitcoin, you can see right now we've had 6,100 traders liquidated in the past hour, where most of them come in at Bitcoin at 5.2 million, Ethereum 2.23, and Doge and Pengu, and Solana and Uxlink. Oh, wow. Okay, anyways, some mad coins there. But just looking at the order flow, I can see that we do have some bids down here. We've got a bid down here, 1.32 million, but volume is very, very light across the board. I'm not really seeing the big boys coming in. They've got 20 million at 83,960, but usually you're going to see these big orders sit in the order book itself. Whether they get taken or not is a different story. And the reason why I look at this order here and I think, oh, wow, there's 20 million right there at 83,960. Well, last night, the reason for Bitcoin made a little bit of a pump last night is because there was an order of 20 million at around the 93,000 region. Okay, no, just above the 99,000. Okay, and it went for that liquidity. But there have been instances when I've seen orders on Ethereum where you're like, bloody hell, there's like $12 million worth of Ethereum to be picked up on an offer. That means they're looking to sell it at the highs. Okay, and price was trading so close to it, it never went to it. So what you've got to look for if you're using the CoinAnk in principle is this. Say you've got an order here. Look, here we go. Perfect example. See this order here? Where is it? I just had it. Oh, there you go. So this is what you're looking for. The initial amount for this order says 1.28 million, right? It actually had 18 million traded. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there are significant points in Bitcoin that are going to trigger people's interest. That's what you're looking for. You may be looking at an order here that says, okay, there's 7 million to be transacted right there. You wait for that 7 million to be picked up and you see that it manages to pick up 7 million. Awesome. But if you see any more of an order above the initial amount, it tells you that that is grabbing someone's attention. Someone is prepared to buy at that point. In other words, there are eyes on the chart to pick up Bitcoin. And the more you see that order amount coming over the initial amount, it tells you that there are players actively waiting to pick up Bitcoin at speed, transacting at that point, okay? Because it wasn't an order that was placed before. You can see that we don't really have an order of 18 million nearby. So all we've got right here is just this 1.3, 520,000, 7 million, 4 million. So then what we're looking for is if they do bring Bitcoin's price down and then we come back to this and see what was transacted, we can then say to ourselves, okay, initially it was 7 million. Someone else came in and made it to 12 million. Someone is interested. And the more frequent you see that happening in a specific point, you could then come to the idea that the guys who are bidding Bitcoin more at that point will want to then see a profit in the later stage, which will then justify Bitcoin's price starting to work up at some point. Okay? So that's how you use the order flow in principle. I mean, I've got basic factory settings on this, so there's nothing fancy about it, but it's just how you understand the order flow to help you work out if Bitcoin's price is going to go higher or not. Okay? Now, with that being said, quickly going over into exo charts just to understand what we've got going off over here. All right, so exo charts. We've got the 4-hour candle on Ethereum.
Look at this, dude. We are so far down.
Here, so that's interesting. I've got Bitcoin's 4-hour candle trading at the lows towards the actual profile. And they did this yesterday where they were building a profile and they held price similar to
We're
yesterday's
below the
pump.
profile right
And
now.
they
That's
effectively did,
horrible.
not yesterday's pump,
Below
on
the
day
second.
before Christmas, and they just shifted out. They completely moved away from the range. So some of you might be looking at price action right now thinking, maybe Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum. Well, we are right now back into the psychological ranges, and what will serve you all when it comes to the hybrid system is to mark off areas in the chart that they are likely to come back in towards. And that's one area right there on Ethereum, okay? You've also got this green vector candle zone right here, which could be acting as a point of interest where the market's memory could be triggered, which is effectively the last of the green vector candle region down here. So you've got one more zone down here that they could go
You
and
lose
attack.
this, you
And we
go
know
below
that there's
3K.
liquidity down there, especially at the psychological low. Flipping it over to Bitcoin itself, just have a look at where we
Yeah,
are.
watch this.
You can see fast move up, vector to vector. They're going to bring it back down again. We've got a historical point in the chart that
You
they
go
could
below
try and come
92, it's
towards,
over.
but what if they're not going to continue? Well, if we see Bitcoin drop down even further, we would have effectively had the 3 hits to the low. You got 1 hit down here, and you got 1 hit down here. And as long as the drop down is higher than these 2
We're
peaks
fine.
right here, then we could be in line for an accumulation
Yeah.
phase. All right. We're going in towards the end of the monthly candle as well, guys.
Oh
So
my
if we just
God,
go over
that's
to
so
the monthly
right.
candle, we can see where we are. Now look at
Monthly.
this. Bitcoin's monthly candle has created a lovely wick, and you've got all of this right here, which could be posing as a problem. Now, for holders, this is what I suggest you do. I suggest you take the high of this wick, go all the way down to the low of the wick, and mark yourself out the midpoint. This is your range, okay? This is your range that the monthly candle could end up becoming if it's going to be the case. You would expect massive support to come in line around the 83,232. Okay, this is from a structural point of view.
If this
ain't
happens,
about
I lose
FUD, this
like
ain't about
5K.
nothing. So get that out your brains. This is from a structural point of view. If we look at Bitcoin on the monthly time frame, it looks like it's doing pretty well to stay above key moving averages. Okay, so it's doing all right. Dropping it down to the weekly chart itself, we can see that let me just get rid of all of this. We can see that we have got no vectors at the highs right here. And you can see that this week wiped out 1, 2, 3, nearly 4 weeks of gains. Okay, so 1 week wiped out 4. That is a bit of a problem. Okay, it's a bit of a problem, which tells me that if this candlestick can't sustain itself, then Bitcoin could be on the trajectory to start working towards key areas. And the next key area would be within this zone, where you would expect 2
This has
bouts
to
of
happen
support
within
to
the
come
next
into
3
play.
weeks.
Bitcoin support is either going to come
If
in
it doesn't, we're
at and
fine.
around the 89,000
Trump
point,
inauguration.
or it's going to come in at around the 80,000 point. If either of these 2 price points get compromised, so if you lose the 89,000 and Bitcoin trades into it aggressively, there's a good chance they're going to try and test this 80. And if they can't hold that, we'll then be going back into the biggest consolidation period over here, which
73,
I
yeah.
believe would be a good area for Bitcoin accumulation. Okay, I genuinely believe that will be a good area for accumulation. I'm getting ready to play a game on the ETFs itself. So I'm going over, I've got around 10 grand in this eToro account, and I'm waiting for, what I'm actually planning on doing is I'm planning on playing ETFs this year, because the idea is that the bonds
I was
market
too
is going
naive.
to do something. Okay, so there's about 10 grand in this account. Let me just have a look. Yeah, I've got 10 grand in here. And what I'm actively waiting for is I'm even going to play a couple of things. I'm going to be playing the ETFs, and I've got a portfolio of ETFs that I want to put together. Okay, so it's going to be based on US equities.
Gonna
It's
be
going
interesting.
to be on cyclical ETFs. I'm going to be playing fixed income ETFs, which are effectively bonds. Okay, and the only reason why I'm looking at the bonds, which is where I might actually just go full throttle and distribute this capital into ETF bonds, because right now, guys, we are heading into something very interesting with the bonds market. The bonds are trading at significant lows. And the only reason why the bonds are low is because they're effectively waiting to see what's going to happen with Trump and his tariff policies. Okay, that's going to be a massive thing. Looking at the yields across the board, you can see the yields are going up 4.3% on the 2-year, and then of course on the 10-year you've got yourself 4.63%. I'm telling you now, if these bond yields go to 5%, then everyone's going to rush into the bonds. Okay, looking at this chart over here, which is an ETF chart, which shows me effectively where we are in terms of ETFs in principle. It's the good thing about this thing here is the IBD ETF market strategy. It pretty much says to you when you should be playing ETFs, okay? And it does say to you, raise exposure, cut exposure, and these little titles right here just tell you when ideally you should be committing your liquidity and not committing your liquidity, okay? So this is something interesting for me with that. But when it comes to the ETFs themselves, going into, if this is an ETF play going into the new year, if the bonds market's yields hit 5%, that's going to trigger a lot of heavyweights to go into the bonds. So I'm going to be positioning myself to exploit that and start picking up ETFs that are heavily weighted on bonds. Now, if we just go over to this right here, okay, and have a look at the bonds themselves, or the ETF screener, we can see that some of the bonds are actually starting to mark up a little bit. So if I go over to the bond over here, the bond ETFs, just wait for that, 2 seconds, come on, here we go. So you can see that bonds themselves, they're starting to come up in the play. So we've got, where is it? Aggregated iShares Core Bond ETF. You've got Total Bond Market ETF. So they're coming up right now. And if we look at the 30-day net cash inflow, Bitcoin's going to be the one at the top right there. Okay. But you've got, where is it? Well, there's, yeah, the MicroStrategy one is coming into play. Yeah, Bitcoin's down here as well. So that's been doing really well. Where is my 30-day return one? It usually gives me that flavor. Where is it? Okay, so the bonds are actually moving from here. Defensive industry. No, the US, it's all about the bonds, bro. Where is it? Where is it? I swear I had it. Yeah, it's TLT seems to be doing all right. Wait there. Let me get TLT up here. That should put things into perspective. iShares 20-year bonds. Let's have a look. Yeah, so look, it's consolidating here, all right? So I'm going to be looking for bonds with TLT in there. The number of bonds hasn't been doing too great. However, once the bonds markets hit 5% on the yield and we're close towards it, that, ladies and gentlemen, and if I marry up the story together, if the Bank of Japan decide to increase the interest rates, right? They increase their interest rates. The yen goes up. The 10-year bond market for the yen shoots up, right? The euro goes up. The 10-year bonds, US, also shoot up, okay? And that's the play that I'm looking for so that I can take advantage of all those ETFs that are showing the idea of investors putting money into the bonds. I'm going to exploit that probably for a month, see if I can get back up above the 102 mark. Happy days. Because the 5% will trigger madness in the bonds market. What we're looking for is if the 5% in the bonds is going to make investors withdraw money from the stock market and put it into the bonds. Or they're going to keep money in the stock market and keep money in the bonds. So you've then got positive, high risk and low risk being applied in the stock market. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? Tino, you was bullish on Bitcoin yesterday. This guy, he must be special. What have I said that's bad about Bitcoin? They just don't get it, man. They don't get it. They don't get it. I was bullish on Bitcoin yesterday, wasn't I? Yeah, I was long on Bitcoin. No, yeah, I was long on Bitcoin, and we made some money off it. Happy days. So there's your bullish sentiment. Yeah? Any questions, guys? Any questions for me? Any questions? Do you entry with full position with 430, or do you try to go and understand you're on the right side and then you add to it? Start at 430 directly or lower, then an increase. Listen, it's, for example, like do not do what I do. Okay? So I've got 30,000 in this balance right here, and if I'm going to take a trade on that principle, hypothetically, okay, go about 439. I want to try and aim for at least 120 contracts on Ethereum. Okay, so how much would that cost me if I go full whack? All right, and so if I go it's on Bitcoin. Well, on Bitcoin, we'll try and go for around 3.9 Bitcoin, 3.19 Bitcoin. Okay, that means my margin is $600. All right, so I'm using their money, high leverage, but I'm putting in $600 of my own cash. What's the drawdown like? Well, the drawdown is, it can be a little bit tricky. You know, you can lose easily 2.5 grand in one move on Bitcoin, but that's where I pick my spots so that I can effectively exploit the momentum in that trade. If it goes against me by a couple of grand, I close the trade. That's it. There's no magical way on how much you can use. If you've got capital behind you to allow you to absorb that, happy days, okay? But it's no point in using that sort of size when you've got a balance of like $5,000. You're going to get eaten alive. It's going to just attack your account. There's no point. So for a new trader, You want to use high leverage, but use little capital relative to your balance. Okay? So like even this, like if I use that leverage, I want to try and keep it and say, look, $55, $84 and have at least a decent amount in your account so that you can absorb that. When you're playing with leverage, this is what happens. You can't evade leverage. Leverage is sharp. Okay, as they say, it's a double-edged sword. It's a very sharp tool. And if you can avoid cutting yourself, cool. But improve the odds of you not cutting yourself by not committing all of your capital. There's no point. What is $84? What is $84
going to go for a
going to do to
little
my
net,
balance
guys.
at 30K? It's not going to do anything, is it? And the drawdown, it's not going to keep
Might
me
come back
alive.
later.
Okay, if I were to go full whack and take on 4.38,
Jo, Panalito.
yeah, I'm only putting up $953
Was geht? Ich habe dir auf Instagram geschrieben.
If it goes
Ich gehe
against
gerade
me
offline.
badly,
Ich
I
mache ein
could be
kleines
easily
Nickerchen,
in a
glaube ich.
5.5K, 6.5K loss. I can easily absorb a 10K loss. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probe my trade. So I just smack it back down to around 1.8 or 2.3 in 2.23 in Bitcoin size, all right? And then manage my expectations from there. That's how I do it. But I'm waiting for the right point where I can see volumes coming in, momentum's coming in. That way I know that if I capture the move, I'm going to see a little bit of the move. That's why yesterday I was like, okay, Bitcoin took that massive move to the upside, all right? I caught the move and I scaled into the position as it was going higher. I moved my position a little bit. So my margin overall on that 10 grand trade was 11 grand trade was what? I only risked $1,000. You know?
Interessant. Ich versuche mal den
Price
hier.
was trading sideways. I wasn't seeing a drawdown. I wasn't given a reason to believe that I needed to get out. In my mind, I've already absorbed how much I can lose. And I'm happy to lose that. If it hits that price, fine. We walk out. Because I've already got it in my mind. You know? Simple question, is today long or short? Well, it could be long, it could be short. It depends on the time you take to open the trade. How long is your long going to be? And how short is your short going to be? If you to say to me, I want to go long for the next 3 days. Well, yeah, Bitcoin can go up over the next 3 days. Or if you say you want to go short, well, Bitcoin could go down over the next 3 days. It's your time frame. And that's the problem with people in crypto. It's like, oh, Bitcoin up or down.
Funktioniert
the
das?
assumption is that I say Bitcoin up, Bitcoin goes up. You've made a shit ton of money.
Warum hat der
Happy
andere nicht
days.
funktioniert?
I think the game is that simple. You're missing out the bigger picture, man. You know, it's all about how often you decide to really put yourself in a situation where if you're trading and looking at your balance, you're not trading. Simple as. You're not trading. You're not paying attention to what's going on. When I'm doing live recording trading videos, you'll notice that.
Also viel Spaß damit, sollst du bestellen wollen. Ich gehe jetzt auf.
Traders
Mach
Rally
jetzt ein Nickerchen.
website, you'll notice that I'm rarely looking at my balance.
Yo.
I don't
Alrighty,
look at
guys.
my balance.
See you later.
I'm looking at the
GG,
chart.
goodbye.
I just recorded a